calling to order a regular meeting of the Burlington City Council. Before we begin, I did just want to take an opportunity briefly to recognize the loss of really two titans in the Vermont State House since the City Council last met, Senator Dick Mazza and Senator Dick Sears. Senator Mazza of the Grand Isle District worked tirelessly on behalf of constituents, and as the second longest serving member of the body, he rightfully took pride in his efforts to bring civility and bipartisanship to the State House. Senator Sears in the Bennington District also served as a steadfast advocate for his constituents, particularly the most vulnerable, and his efforts towards criminal justice reform in particular will be long remembered and long felt. These are great losses for our state, for Senator Mazza's and Senator Sears' communities, and as our flags here across the state have flown at half-staff over the past couple weeks, I thought it right for us to acknowledge this loss here before beginning our meeting. Now in beginning our meeting, Councilor Doherty, if I could turn to you for a motion on our agenda.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I would make a motion to amend and or adopt the agenda as follows. Remove from the consent agenda item 5.12, Ordinance, Chapter 18, Housing, Article 5, Regulation of Conversion of Rental Housing to Condominiums or Cooperatives, Councilors Shannon, Travers, Brown, McKnight, and place it on the deliberative agenda as item 6.6 per City Council President Travers and per Councilor Grant.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Is there a second on the motion to adopt that agenda as amended?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We have our agenda. Thank you. We will skip to we'll skip to item 2. It's not a skip, it's item 2 on our agenda, which is public forum, which was set for a time certain of 6:45 p.m. I will go ahead and open public forum at this time. Under our council rules, we will first hear from Burlington residents here in City Hall, and then among those Burlington residents online, and then we will repeat this process for non-Burlington residents. As a reminder, in order to participate in public forum online, you need to have signed up at least an hour in advance through the City Council's website. Each speaker in public forum will be provided 2 minutes. When I call your name, if you are here in person, please come to the table. Make sure the microphone is on by seeing that the green light is lit, and speak directly into the microphone. For those online, I will let you know once you've been unmuted. When providing comments, please direct them to me as the chair and not to any other individual. It is important that City Hall remain a safe place for those who for those here, for those who serve, and for those watching our meetings. The Council respects and values a diversity of opinions and perspectives on public issues. We ask, however, that all comments be free from individualized attacks, hate, harassment, obscenities, or other derogatory language about other people or groups based on their age, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, or any other protected characteristic. We also ask that public comments avoid conduct which is unreasonably loud, disruptive, or discourteous. If I interrupt a speaker at any time, it will be because I'm providing the speaker an opportunity to proceed again in accordance with these rules. If public comment continues in violation of the rules, I reserve the right to end public comment at that point in time. With that, at the moment, we have 5 individuals who have signed up for public comment here in person. We will begin with the first of them, which is Todd DeLuca, to be followed by Dave Marr. So Todd, if you could come forward here to the table, thank you.
Hi, City Councilors.
Go ahead.
Hi, President. I wanted to talk about 3 issues.
You're good.
Thanks. I want to talk about 3 issues briefly. First, I wanted to thank the city for the efforts to keep the waterfront clean of trash and needles. It's been looking great down there, despite a very rapid increase in the number of encampments. There's still a number of old encampments at the waterfront and in other parts of town. I've talked about that at other forums. I would like to see the city work on cleaning those up. They have trash, needles, other drugs, human waste. These are not safe places in our city. Thank you. Secondly, I just wanted to voice my support for the draft ordinance that's on the agenda, supporting affordable home ownership by ending the condominium conversion ban. I hope you all will vote to support the ending of that ban. Finally, I really wanted to speak out about the turning of the graffiti ordinance into a hate crime ordinance. I would ask you to please don't criminalize disagreement. The call for this ordinance change came from the condemnation of transphobia that happened a year ago. The phrase, "no one is born in the wrong body," is, to me, a phrase of love, not hate. I would ask that you, if you want to, if you have the time, to please read the CAS review out of the United Kingdom to learn more about how the National Health Service is curtailing gender-affirming care in response to the lack of evidence justifying using these dangerous drugs on children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dave Marr, to be followed by Jane McDougall.
Who turned that off? Good evening. My name is Dave Marr. I'm a longtime resident of Burlington. Lived here since '91, and I've lived in the area for pretty much all of my adult life. And I'm here to express my support for our police chief, John Murad. I think he's done an outstanding job navigating strong headwinds and rough seas. I think he's done as good a job as anyone could do, probably better. And he has roots in Vermont. He's from Underhill. And one time, I happened to bump into him in the Upper Smuggler's Notch parking lot. And he took time out to greet me, and we exchanged pleasantries. So that's just the kind of guy he is. So I hope you all vote to approve our police chief, John Murad, for his reappointment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Next, we have Jane McDougall, who will be followed by Lee Morgan.
Hello, how are you? I'm here to ask basically, how is the sidewalks doing? Because the Cathedral Square sidewalks need badly of repair. And also down towards Pearl Street and Main Street need to repair. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDougall. Next, we have Lee Morgan, to be followed by Chris Hasley.
Hi, folks. My name is Lee Morgan. I live in Ward 7. Happy to be here tonight. I am here to speak to you in support of the appointment of Chief Murad. And while that may surprise some of you, it kind of surprises me too. I just want to talk about how I arrived at that. I do want to say first, I think this is not one of those issues where there's a right or wrong vote across the spectrum. I think that there are some people here tonight who voting no is the right choice for them and their constituency, and I don't fault anyone, but I want to talk about my experience of being a New North Ender and why I support this appointment. You know, as a lot of you know, I've been spending a lot of time over the past year talking to my neighbors, And I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on the sentiments around public safety and community safety in the New North End. And I have seen firsthand how when Chief Murad adopts a more progressive stance about something, particularly in this case, Narcan. The attitudes around Narcan administration in my neck of the woods were very negative. And the chief became more vocal about how he believes that this is a good thing. It's a good thing that everyone knows how to do it. It's good that it's available. Now I never hear people talk negatively about Narcan anymore. This has ceased to be a hot button issue in the New North End. And I have hope that as Mayor Mulvaney Stanek and Chief Murad become aligned in their approach to community safety, I believe that that progress will continue in the New North End and across Burlington. I trust the mayor and her very good stance on equity when in the intersections of public safety. And it's a one-year appointment. Let us see over the next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Next up is Chris Hasley.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, President Travers, members of the City Council. I was not intending to speak tonight, but President Travers' comments regarding Senator Mazza and Senator Sears reminded me that we at the Wards 2 and 3 NPA on June the 13th will be having a resolution to honor Representative Kurt McCormick for his many years of service, not only here to the city of Burlington, but for some 13 years prior to that as a representative from the city of Rutland. Kurt has done a number of things relating to issues with transportation, energy at the State House. He's known also for building the gateway to the Decatur Street, his baby blue building there. So I just wanted to let everyone know about that. If you want to come out, we'd love to have you. And then last but not least, I'm sponsoring a film screening and panel discussion on overdose prevention centers, June 12th, Main Street Landing. We're going to have a 1-hour discussion followed by Narcan training. So I hope to see some of you all there. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was the last speaker we have signed up at the moment here in City Hall, which means we will now turn online. We have 3 Burlington residents signed up to speak online and 2 non-Burlington residents. The first Burlington resident that we have signed up online is Jean Hopkins. And Jean, you should be able to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
The volume's a little low, but I don't think that's...
Oh, maybe I can make it louder. Is that better?
I think that's good enough.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay. I am Jean Hopkins from Ward 1. The noise of the F-35s actually sent me to this meeting, but then I discovered there is an item 6.6 on the agenda about rental units being converted to affordable housing, which can be owned by the former renters. I hope I read that correctly. Perhaps my council reps have had a chance to read an article I wrote about basic home ownership for every citizen of Vermont. With climate change upon us, we need to focus on housing in this country instead of dangerous weapons. I think more people will be moving to Vermont if we focus on building more affordable housing, which they can securely own. Let's ground the dangerous F-35s and build more housing with assistance from Housing and Urban Development, Burlington Housing Authority, Champlain Housing Trust, and Habitat for Humanity. Then the Committee on Temporary Shelter might have more rewarding work and be able to actually house everyone on their wait list this winter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next individual we have online, Burlington resident, is Sharon Busher. Sharon, you should be able to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Travers, and I'm proud to be a neighbor to Jean. I'm speaking tonight about the condo conversion ordinance that's on your agenda. When I first got elected to the city council, this was percolating and had just got adopted. And I understood that the reason it was adopted was to prevent displacement of renters by condo conversion. So I think that I'm looking forward to the conversation that occurs that actually does protect the renter or allows the renter to potentially acquire the condo and not displace people. I think it's tricky business. I think it's good that it is being relooked at, as it was mentioned during the neighborhood code at the Planning Commission, about this as an obstacle to provide home ownership, and I really support measures that allow people to own their own place to live. So I'm looking forward to having this get referred to ordinance and having a more in-depth conversation about it, the pros and cons, and what can be done and what can't be done. But thank you again for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Sharon. The last Burlington resident we have online is Colin Larson. Colin, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hey, can you hear me?
If you could hold on one moment, we can hear you okay, but is there any way to turn up the volume a little bit here in? Okay. It's okay, I think, it's okay. We just have a couple more speakers. Colin, if there's any way for
Okay.
you to speak sort of closer into your own computer microphone, that may be helpful. We can hear folks, but it's just a little quieter than normal. So go ahead, please, Colin.
Okay, sure, yeah, I'll talk a little louder. Given the conversation around the condo conversion fee, I just wanted to make a point and a recommendation. Homeownership is usually a target that most cities pursue, and for a variety of reasons, I don't think it's a bad thing. But I did want to quote this section from the book Affordable City by Shane Phillips, who's a researcher at the UCLA Lewis Center for Regional Policy. I'd also recommend everyone get a copy of this book and read it. So he says it's important to know what to ask for and to pick one, either housing affordability or rising home values. So this is especially true of policies that encourage homeownership and rising home values, because ever-growing property values are completely incompatible with long-term housing affordability. The two are mutually exclusive. For homes to be an outstanding investment, their values must appreciate faster than inflation, and that means incomes will trail behind home values over time without fail. So I just wanted to clarify that, typically in the US, we pursue policy that will increase property values over time, but by doing that, we're making housing less affordable for future generations by default. So if we think about, I don't think we should think about home ownership as a way to build wealth in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. We will now turn to non-Burlington residents that are online. The first individual that we have there is Jennifer Decker. Jennifer, you should be able to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. During last year's church tree lighting, many mourned the death of 7,000 Palestinian children. Now, 12,300 children have died in Palestine, and there are 17,000 unaccompanied minors separated from their families. Last winter, arriving at the stage in front of the tree, demonstrators left ample space in front of the stage and followed event organizers' directions and turned off our classical music when we were requested to do so. Then Murad arrived and charged at us 0 to 60, forcibly trying to make us leave. He violated our First Amendment rights and immediately threatened peaceful demonstrators with arrest. Some of you saw the footage. It was worse before we started filming. The cops went into a huddle, and afterwards Murad continued to behave in a physically and verbally intimidating manner. His actions interfered with my freedom of religion. I felt like I was at a holiday event that represented what I actually believe. But then Murad came and showed his bias and Islamophobia. Not long after, his initial investigation into the shooting of 3 Palestinian students was incompetent, knocking on doors until the shooter turned himself in. Please don't reappoint him. The Constitution guarantees us equal protection. So one of the worst mistakes we've made as a community is the mistake of the F-35 basing. I sent footage of last week's F-35 crash in Albuquerque to counselors and to the Oak Ledge Front Porch Forum this week. I look forward to hearing your replies. I hope the City Council will make amends with regard to the mistake of extending VTANG's lease without conditions. Please protect children from war and hearing and neurological damage.
Thank you.
State-sanctioned police and military violence,
Thank you.
bigotry,
We need to,
will not
we're
be
at
on
the 2-minute mark.
Burlington's streets and not bringing more climate
Thank you.
impacts to Vermont's skies.
Thank you very much. We have one other non-Burlington resident signed up for public forum, and that is Jake Blend. And Jake, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hello. My name is Dr. Jacob Roosevelt Blend, and I'm a Smart City Ambassador to US Ignite and the Tech Connect National Conferences representing Vermont Innovation. I am currently the only one from the state doing this. I'm also a Burlington representative for Vermont Democrats and on the Disability Caucus. My question is, what is happening with the sale of Burlington Telecom as far as the BTV Ignite money in the amount of $2.5 million set aside for innovation for community benefit? I'm asking for an ethics committee or other fact-finding, as that would satisfy the public currently deprived of community funds, and I'm also asking for the removal of the current BTV Ignite leader who does not even live in the state. Burlington deserves better. At this point, I am from Winooski, but we are involved as well due to Burlington Telecom rolling out fiber optic. We are entitled to that money as well. The community is. This was a 10-year fund, and I have seen zero news. The BTV Ignite website is outdated. If you go there, you get pop-ups from the pandemic. The current leadership is just not doing its job, and I think we need change. I've received absolutely no response from those in charge. I've been gaslit, and at this point, I think I'm blacklisted because I don't really understand why there's zero response to anybody. It's not just me. I'm representing the entire innovation ecosystem here. I have 26 years of civil service. I created the face shields during the pandemic, but I'm doing this as a volunteer, and Burlington is completely locked out of the federal ecosystem here. You're deprived of money. I seek change.
Thank you very much. That was the last individual we had signed up for public forum. Seeing no one else signed up, we will go ahead and close public forum now at 7:05 p.m. That takes us to the third item on our agenda, which is climate emergency reports. Is there any counselor or does the mayor have a climate emergency report? Councilor Grant.
Thank you. This weekend there was an event thrown by the Sanders Institute called The Gathering, and there were many different panels that occurred. I just wanted to make people aware that you can go to YouTube, search for the Sanders Institute, and what you will want to look for is something that was posted this weekend, and it will say Saturday morning at the Sanders Institute gathering. And there was an excellent panel about taking on big oil to end fossil fuel subsidies. I found it incredibly interesting and encourage anyone who cares about this issue, which should hopefully be all of us, to listen to that panel. Very, very interesting, very, very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Does any other counselor have a climate emergency report? Okay, seeing none, that turns to item 4 on our agenda, which is public health and safety emergency updates. Does any counselor or the mayor have a public health and safety emergency update? Councilor Kane.
Thanks. So yesterday, healthcare workers staged an event here at City Hall to oppose the genocide in Gaza. It's their second such rally. They had one up at the university when the students had the encampment going. And I think the students, set a good example in asking their university to review its investments, its assets, and I think the city should be doing the same. I've said this before, and I appreciate the healthcare workers demonstrating. Relatedly, an F-35 crashed in Albuquerque this past week, which I think underscores one element of the local public health and safety implications of funding genocide. I'd also like to share an experience from a ride-along I did with the Burlington Police Department on Friday. It was a nice experience overall, and I think all the officers were well-intentioned, but I do have a concern that I would like to share with the public. My concern is that there doesn't seem to be a mechanism to prevent an excessive number of officers to respond to a small incident, therefore depleting the available officers and potentially triggering the priority response plan. I want to preface this by saying I don't even know who came up with the priority response plan or how department policy and procedure was established or is maintained, but I observed that when one officer would respond to or initiate an incident, other officers would hear about the situation over the radio and also respond to it, no matter how small. So for instance, someone violated a 24-hour curfew, and the officer I was with heard about that situation on the radio, for which I'm pretty sure he wasn't called for backup, and then did provide backup to that situation. It seems to me that a well-designed system, and especially in a short-staffed department, would have officers, being judicious about where they provide backup. So perhaps in a well-designed system, officers don't provide backup unless it's explicitly requested, and then when backup is provided, officers consider every 5 minutes or so whether they really need to stick around, so that we don't sit in active priority response, i.e. ignoring lower-level incidents for the majority of shifts. The situation that most concerned me in this regard was a call from a couple with an infant at the bottom of church who had seen two men fighting and brandishing weapons. Given the firearm involved, I can imagine that sending multiple officers might have been sensible. 2 officers showed up, one of whom I was with. The people with the guns were gone. We were then flagged down by 2 seemingly homeless people with a legitimate but minor fight that had already died down before we got there and was not the reason we were at the scene. Over the next 45 minutes or so, several additional officers, including the supervisor, showed up to mediate and document the situation between the homeless people. To my knowledge, this meant that nobody was patrolling the city or looking for the car with the angry people with the guns. It's possible there was one other officer on the shift of 5 officers who wasn't there mediating the homeless situation, but even so, that officer would have been held back based on priority response. Meanwhile, the same angry people with the guns were 3 blocks away by Perkins Pier threatening somebody with the guns, and we were late to the scene, seemingly because we were so focused on the aftermath of this minor fight between homeless folks. Not only were the 5 officers on duty unable to pursue the gun situation, but presumably every other call that came in to the department over the 45 minutes or so that we were dealing with the situation that nobody called in about, presumably all other calls were referred to the online incident reporting system or in some other way were ignored during that period of time. As a result of this experience, I'm left wondering if there are any mechanisms in place to prevent officers from providing excessive backup, which triggers the priority response and ultimately non-response to incidents. If no mechanism exists, then I recommend we develop one. For instance, it'd be good if we documented how many officers respond to each incident so that we can better understand whether what I saw is a consistent issue. For instance, perhaps priority 3 incidents only merit the response of 1 officer, rather than, there being backup provided unless a specific call is made. I would also like to see data on the percentage of time that we do sit in active priority response. This is just a concern that I have as a result of doing a ride-along with officers. I recommend that other counselors do ride-along as well, and members of the public. I believe you can. I only did this because, Counselor Barlow recommended that I do. And I just want to underscore that, I wasn't planning to say anything, about my experience. I just did happen to just leave the experience kind of with this concern that I was not expecting to see. And again, I think all the officers act in good faith, and my comments are strictly in regard to the systems or lack thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Does any other councilor have a public health and safety emergency update? Councillor Grant.
Thank you. We had an issue where something that is very important to Burlington, H72, was vetoed by the governor. So now the next step is to hope that there is a veto-proof majority who will vote to override this veto. Overdose prevention centers is very important to Burlington. And given what is going on in and around our downtown area, it's crucial that this passes. So encouraging our city councilors and encouraging the residents of the city of Burlington to be sure, to be aware of which of your representatives do not support this, so that you may reach out to them and talk to them about what you are seeing, because we know people are seeing a lot, and express your support for H72 so that we can hopefully have this vetoed, overwritten. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor McKnight.
Thank you. So I want to pass on a message/question that I've got. Oh, thank you. Is that better? Yes. Okay. I've gotten a lot of questions and messages from constituents about the recent violent crime, some of it random, that we have been seeing in Burlington in the past month. And the general sentiment in these questions and concerns is a concern with a lack of acknowledgement that these have happened. So I wanted to take some time to acknowledge that we've had an assault on an elderly man, a robbing at gunpoint, the high-speed car chase that ended tragically and placed many residents in harm's way that Councillor Kane just mentioned. We've seen an increase in open drug use and more. And another concern that residents have shared along with this is that we have seen the mayor's administration giving interviews about how we are supporting encampments, interviews on remarks about bills that are coming out or not coming out of Montpelier, and an announcement about how we've gathered members of the public to talk about public safety, which I think is very important. But we haven't heard a public acknowledgement about these scary incidents that have been occurring lately, at least not that I'm aware of. And folks are really keen to learn, that the short-term action steps that the administration is taking to make Burlington safer for residents, and to learn what the administration thinks about these incidents in particular. And so I trust that there is action being taken, but I just want to urge the urgency of wanting to see short-term concrete steps to make Burlington safer, ideally in the next 1 to 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKnight. Any other councillor with a public health and safety emergency update? Councillor Newbeezer.
I wasn't going to speak, but very briefly, I just want to highlight, as we're facing all of these challenges, and Councillor Grant just mentioned it, in the midst of an unprecedented crisis in terms of substance use, in terms of our courts not having capacity to process sort of their basic caseload, our governor vetoed overdose prevention sites, which are going to be a critical part of the solution, which has been incredibly frustrating. There was also a bill in Montpelier that residents should be aware of in Burlington, because we need to continue to push our delegation and our statewide leaders on this to properly fund. This bill would have properly funded, amongst other things, our judicial system, giving us the resources to carry out the basic functions of government. Montpelier's response was that the wealthiest among us, folks making more than $500,000 annually, couldn't possibly pay more in taxes to ensure we have that revenue, which is incredibly frustrating, and I think represents a lack of understanding of what's actually going on in Burlington and the impacts on our community. The final thing I'd say is that I've heard a number of folks and a number of my colleagues refer to the city supporting encampments and a number of pieces in the media in the last week. And I would just say that I would ask residents to look at reality, and if there are encampments and there are folks, are we going to characterize providing porta potties so that we don't have folks without proper facilities to use the bathroom affecting our businesses downtown or affecting our parks? Are we going to characterize just having trash receptacles available and sort of treating folks with dignity as somehow encouraging or encampments to occur? I've heard that characterization thrown around, and personally found it really frustrating, and I don't think is a fair characterization, and I actually think is a quite pragmatic approach to a really tough problem that the state refuses to deal with and refuses to be a good partner on, in my view. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Does any other councilor have a public health and safety emergency update? Councilor Shannon?
Thank you, President Travers. I actually had a list very similar to Councilor Brown McKnight's, and I won't go through that, but I will say I echo her sentiments. And I also want to add that at our last Board of Finance meeting, the mayor provided a community memo on community safety investments. And in that, we had a fairly lengthy discussion about providing support to encampments with dumpsters, portalets, and water mentioned in the memo. I asked, and I think others may have asked as well, where were these things going to go? And expressed concern, because I have dealt with the reality of providing these services in an encampment, and I've seen the results. And it hasn't been what we hoped at the time that we did it. We were told that it had not been determined yet where these things would go, only to find out after the fact that there had been a news stream going on, I think maybe shortly before our meeting and continuing after, that these things were going into an encampment at the waterfront along the bike path. And not only these things, but also weed whackers and gasoline being provided at encampments, which to me caused great concern. And I don't understand why that wasn't the answer when I asked the direct question. And I hope that tonight the mayor will speak to the issues raised by Councilor McKnight, as well as these issues about encampments, where they will be supported and how they will be supported, and where they will not be tolerated. Many people, we've had a steady stream of emails in the last 2 weeks from people who have never emailed us before, in many cases, with deep concern about the city's safety. I am very glad that the library is going to be getting a social worker and private security. I think that can help, certainly during the hours that the library is open. But the library has limited hours, and people and children go to the library on a regular basis. I know when I was a parent, I often showed up at the library only to find that they were closed. Should parents and children have to walk through the open drug use and drug dealing that they're walking through today on the outside of the library? And how is that going to be controlled? And what is the message to our public safety officers today to deal with that today? And I hope that we hear more about that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there any other councilor? I'll turn to you in a moment, Councilor Grant, if you have a further update. But is there any other councilor that has not spoken yet who has an update? Councilor Litwin.
Thank you. I also had not planned on speaking, but I was inspired by Councilor Newbeezer to address that. And thank you, Councilor Shannon, for setting the record straight. I have personally toured the encampment. To say at 702 Lake Street, To suggest that it's not city sanctioned is questionable for me, because we are providing dumpsters, portalettes, water, and I'm not saying necessarily that we should or shouldn't be doing that, but it's already become a hygienic concern. The porta potty has needles in it. It's already been graffitied. The trash is already overflowing all over the place. I found piles of needles. And it's also off the beaten path. So to suggest that these portalettes are going to keep people a mile and a half away and down a hill from using the bathroom on Church Street, I don't really see it. But I do appreciate that folks are getting some support there. I had been waiting to hear from Mayor Mulvaney Stanek before discussing this because we were promised an update by the end of day today. Again, I would have appreciated more transparency about what was happening at 702 Lake Street in that same Board of Finance meeting. And I look forward to collaborating to address some of that. But I also emailed the Director of Parks and Rec this weekend asking for an update about the tents that are in the prohibited space, which is the urban reserve. There's probably a dozen tents that are there that are not at 702 Lake Street. It is marked prohibited, and I was told that the mayor would be responding to me about that. So, but in that same Board of Finance meeting, Mayor Mulvaney Stanek and I assume the Director of Parks and Rec agreed that camping should not be allowed in our parks. And so I'm eager to also hear from Mayor Mulvaney Stanek, and I'm eager to give her the time to prepare a plan as well that works for everybody and does center folks' dignity. But it is a concern, and the encampment is growing, and I am concerned that there's no plan to provide hygienic support regularly so that when we're talking about dignity, we mean it. So I'm sorry, I don't have any more remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Any other councilor who has not spoken yet? Councilor Grant, did you have a further update?
Just a response to some of what was said. Going back to my service as a counselor in the last year and a counselor, a police commissioner, very, very much aware of the encampment and the situation, the outdoor camping, not only for what's going on now, but what has been going on in the last 3 years. So we are, the library is, what's happening there is definitely newer, and that hasn't happened in the last couple of years. What's happening down on the waterfront has happened repeatedly over the last few years. What we have is we continue to have a serious issue of whack-a-mole, telling people that they have to move from certain areas, but there's no area for them to move, and then they move to another area that they're not supposed to be, then they move again, and then they move again, and they move again, and we have been in this cycle for 3 years. It's getting worse and worse because of the issues with the motel program and the fact that we do not have the housing. So for everyone who's upset about this, please contact the governor, because there's a huge part of how he has handled, quite frankly, throwing people on the street that has affected Burlington because of the level of services that we have, while other cities and towns either don't offer services at the same level or don't want to offer services at all. And the final thing I will say is when people see an encampment, they should report it on See, Click, Fix, especially if you see garbage accumulating. One of the reasons it has been requested by many people to get more garbage cans out there because of what has been happening. So the response to put garbage cans out in areas where the garbage keeps accumulating is actually a response to what people have been asking for. Porta potties. Jesus, you know, someone said to me, why are we, quote unquote, rewarding people with porta potties? And I was like, rewarding people with like we have to listen to ourselves. We are getting numerous complaints about public defecation, about public urination. I mean, we just can't have it both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Can't speak for the mayor on this or any issue, but I think what I will tell councilors is that I've been in discussions with the mayor about our hosting a working session on the reality of encampments at our next council meeting on June 10th. And so we'll look for updates around that as we post our agenda later this week for our meeting a week from tonight. Are there any other councilors with a public health and safety emergency update? Seeing none, we will close that item and move to item 5 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. After a motion on the consent agenda, just so folks know, we will be turning to our local control commission meeting after this, and then to our deliberative agenda. For a motion on our consent agenda, could I turn to you, Councilor Doherty?
You may. I would move to adopt the consent agenda as amended and take the actions indicated.
Councilor Doherty, is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We will temporarily recess the city council meeting now at 7:28 p.m. and at that same time call to order our local control commission meeting for today, June 3rd. The first item on our agenda for the local control commission is a motion to adopt the agenda. Commissioner Shannon, could I turn to you for a motion on that agenda, a motion on that item?
Yes, I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carpenter. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have our agenda. The next item on our local control commission agenda is the consent agenda. Commissioner Shannon, could I turn to you for a motion on that?
Move to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Seeing no other business on our local control commission agenda, we will adjourn the local control commission without objection at 7:29 p.m. and resume our regular city council meeting. That now takes us to our deliberative agenda. The first item on our deliberative agenda are appointments from Mayor Mulvaney-Stanek. And Mayor Mulvaney-Stanek, I'd like to turn to you to present your appointments.
Thank you, President Travers. So behind, I think they're still there. There they are. It's a weird setup. I don't know how I'm supposed to look at all of you. So behind me are almost all of the department heads that I am proud to present to you as a slate for your consideration for our various departments throughout the city. I worked diligently over the last 2 months, which is a short timeline, to get to know these individuals, to understand their past service to the city, their goals, their professionalism to help us lead the city forward. And I've really appreciated how much work they've all put into major challenges such as closing the $13.1 million budget gap. And I've also been really impressed with folks' creativity, their willingness to do a transition with a new administration, their commitment to the city at the end of the day. And so I am proud to offer the folks in the full slate presented to you. And I think per usual process, if there are questions of individual appointees or recommended appointees, we are ready to take those questions. I want to note later in the memo, we do have, as we know, known vacancies that I've inherited with a almost 2-year vacancy for city attorney and some other known transitions that we are diligently in the middle of hiring for. This week we have interviews for a potential city attorney applicant. We've started the planning director process and will include a city council representative on that process to collaborate. With the REIB process, I will about to announce an interim director this week to help us with the redesign and work ahead of the next year. I met with those folks just last week, the full staff, and they're very excited to move that important work forward. And as I mentioned in my last comments last city council meeting, we do also expect to transition in our human resources department with Karen Durfee moving on to other greener pastures. So we are deep in this process. And one other just note is that there was a 1-2-year appointment for the city assessor, Joe Turner, who maybe is also still here. No. Well, he has a 2-year appointment from the last administration. That's probably why he's not here. But I just wanted to note that because that 2-year appointment does still apply, and that doesn't expire until the end of the upcoming fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Carpenter, could I turn to you for a motion on the mayor's slate of appointments?
Certainly. I would move that we confirm the FY25 mayoral appointments as listed.
Thank you very much, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Councilor Litwin. I had indicated to the council before this meeting that if any councilor had an objection to one of the appointments being considered as part of the slate, that request would be automatically granted. Councilor Grant, I see you're seeking recognition.
Thank you. I would like to divide the appointment of the chief of police from the slate, please.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Grant. That request is automatically granted. Are there any other requests similar to that from any other councilor? Okay. So we will proceed then to consider the slate without the proposed appointment for the chief of police, and then we will proceed to consider the appointment for the chief of police. First, with respect to the slate, are there any councilors who have comments or questions with regards to that slate? Councilor Carpenter.
This is, I think I'm on here, more general, which is to say I've spent a lot of years in governance, being a CEO of an organization, and I just think it's important for us to always remember that our chief elected official is the CEO of the city. They need their team. We don't have to work every day with a team. The mayor does. And I think in all of the good governance I've seen, it's important for the CEO to have a team that they can work with, and that may change over time. I also just want to remind us, those of us who've been around for a very long time, that we used to have quite a disconnected system where some of the department heads were elected by commissioner. Former Mayor Peter Covell changed that. In my opinion, it did not work very well for all of the reasons I've said, which is, I think under most models of good governance, the chief elected officer needs the people that they can work with. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor McKnight.
I wanted to add to Councilor Carpenter's comments and say, there are going to be times at this table where I might have constructive or critical feedback to the mayor's administration, but I think it's also really important to give props where props are due, and I think that the way that the mayor has handled this, the appointing of all of the same department heads has been really admirable, and it didn't have to be this way. Like Councilor Carpenter said, would have been not uncommon for there to be a lot of changes to this group of people that is sitting behind you. And given that our city is in a time of crisis and that sense of stability is really important, I just want to recognize the thoughtfulness around that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McKnight. Any other councilors wish to speak to the slate of candidates? Councilor Shannon.
I'll really just kind of reiterate what's been said. I'm very grateful to the mayor for the recognition of the strength of this group as a team and their dedication to Burlington. I am not one to, I think that the mayor should have the appointees that she wants to have, and it would take something, a real disqualification for me to vote no on somebody. And in this case, I can say I am enthusiastically supportive of this team that has worked so hard for this city. And it's very hard work. It's very stressful work. I want to recognize that and thank the team as well.
Thank you very much, Councilor Shannon. Any other councilors with respect to the slate? All right. We will take the votes one after the other, and so before turning to a vote on either the slate or the appointment for the chief of police, we will now turn to consideration of the divided question on the appointment of the chief of police. Is there any counselor that wishes to speak on the appointment of John Murad, reappointment of John Murad as our chief of police? Counselor Barlow, followed by Counselor Grant.
I would just like to say that I enthusiastically support the reappointment of Chief Murad for the reasons that were expressed during public comment. He's led the department through a very difficult time with not enough resource, quite honestly, and he's stayed with us, and he's committed to Burlington. And like I've said before, when we appointed him as permanent chief, we're lucky to have him. So I hope everybody will be supporting his reappointment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Barlow. Counselor Grant?
Thank you. First, I want to say that I've been very consistent the last few years. I have said repeatedly, openly, in numerous meetings that I believe there can be a path forward for Chief Murad, but that there needed to be a plan in place to address some known issues. And that plan needed to include goals that needed to be met and some way to track the completion of those goals and address if they're not being handled. Because I believe some of these things are interfering with the health of our police department, which in turn is interfering with their part in our community safety system. It's really exactly because our city is in such a time of crisis that I do not support this appointment. We have seen disqualifying behavior, such as the hospital complaint. I do agree that there are not enough officers. The recruitment team that is working right now, I believe, is doing a good job, but retention continues to be a serious issue. We are no better off this time this year than we were last year, despite increases in salary, retention, and sign-on bonuses, a contract that ignored aspects of oversight and accountability, and a contract that has been referred to publicly a number of times as one of the best in the country. Yet we still can't hold officers. Why is that? So we really need to deep dive what is going on with retention. We do have retirements, yes, but that's not the only thing. We have new people that are coming on, and then they leave, and they work for other agencies. I am concerned about the continued lack of support for community engagement, and I believe that can be tied to retention, and I think proper community engagement would also help our recruitment team. I believe that we need to help the chief build and support relationships in the community with stakeholders across our community safety spectrum. I think sometimes there is not the proper respect shown for other stakeholders because it's not looked upon as quote-unquote real justice. There have been data request issues, and there's been numerous issues of disrespect. Too many to go into in the short period of time that I have. But I shouldn't have to, in a public safety meeting, remind the chief that I must respect him as a chief of police and that he needs to respect me as a city councilor who earned my position through the support of my constituents who are not only emailing, not only texting me, but stopping me in the street, and I'm going to see them. I've been in alleyways, I've been in Decker Towers, I've been down in the encampments, I have been everywhere in ways that people really don't fully understand, and I have seen more of the failure in our wards 2 and 3 and we've been bearing the brunt of it for quite some time now. We are not policed in an equitable way. That continues to be a very serious problem to me. I could go on, but I will stop here and just say it's the same reasons that have not been addressed despite numerous emails to the previous administration, and I hope the current administration will put forth a plan to support him and to set him up for success. But as things are at this time, I cannot support him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Is there any other councilor who wishes to speak to the reappointment of the Chief of Police? Go to Councilor Newbeezer, then Councilor Kane.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to my vote. I do have concerns, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them, Councilor Grant just outlined. That being said, I also believe that, like Councilor Grant, the previous administration did not set this department head up for success in a professional setting, and did not set out a clear set of goals to meet, and the expectations just weren't there. And so from the perspective of someone working for the city who deserves a fair process and a chance to work to improve on a number of areas that the community at large have identified are issues, I will be voting for this appointment. I am concerned, and I'll just say anecdotally, I've heard from a number of social service providers, both in Burlington and around Chittenden County and Vermont more widely, and certainly a number of workers in those institutions who work well with other departments in our region and are having consistent issues working well with our department. And so my hope, again, as I've stated before, and I'm going to continue stating, and I hope that despite the fact that we're all elected officials, we can focus on decreasing political rhetoric when we're talking about public safety, and instead just have an honest conversation about what our community needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Kane?
Thank you. My sense is that Chief Murad is sharp, interacts well with officers, and I very much want to support his reappointment for the sake of continuity in the department, in a department that needs a stabilizing force. However, it's clear that he is a weak liaison between the department and the public. He is a weak liaison between the department and the public because what I see is defensiveness and combativeness to the point where real dialogue is generally not an option. His defensiveness and combativeness are on display at all of the police commission meetings, with the hospital incident, at the tree lighting ceremony that was referenced by a speaker during public comment. I'll briefly describe that particular situation actually that evening because I was there. A group of individuals convened before the tree lighting ceremony started to hold a vigil for victims of the genocide in Palestine. Chief Murad and many other officers arrived, and he demonstrated escalatory behavior in a number of ways, including threatening the person closest to the portable speaker that was being used to quietly play music for the vigil, threatening, I believe, to break or confiscate it without warning, and then seemingly not hearing the person trying to tell him that it didn't belong to them. The chief decided that flags and signs, objects that people regularly carry and hold on Church Street, were not permissible due to the risk that they might block someone else's view of the festivities. So he started going up to people and physically shoving and grabbing them from behind and without warning to enforce the rule that he had made no effort to communicate to the vigil attendees who were eager to work with him on finding common ground. For anyone who isn't aware of how activist public events work, attendees typically take cues from organizers, among whom there's typically a police liaison who works proactively to understand and convey instructions and requests from police. Police typically convey instructions and requests to the liaison, who would then have some good faith amount of time, perhaps a minute or two, to convey those instructions and requests to the event attendees. Having been a part of dozens and probably hundreds of activist events in my life, I can say that this process, almost without exception, works smoothly. Chief Murad is the exception, the singular exception. I have never in my life seen a police officer behave in a combative manner. My recollection of the event is so shocking to me that I almost questioned what my eyes saw. However, I stopped questioning my sanity when I heard that a reporter had filmed some of the interactions, that a legal observer was collecting witness statements. Only the most inherently combative people you can imagine would have failed to make any effort to work with the group of people holding candles at a ceasefire banner who felt the need to silently draw attention to an issue. If this group of people is viewed as too threatening to collaborate with, how can we expect the chief to collaborate with anyone who ever disagrees with him about anything? To date, this is the only public-facing situation I've witnessed where Chief Murad had the opportunity to show leadership and de-escalation techniques to his officers, and he appeared to be the least mature of the 13 officers there that day. I know others have similar stories of unbelievably unprofessional behavior demonstrated by the chief for years. And at the end of the day, Chief Murad and I might agree theoretically on how policing in this city should be designed in 2024, but we would never know it because, as far as I can tell, the chief is incapable of dialogue and isn't ready he isn't already confident to share his perspective. And that's not what we need in a police chief. And frankly, active listening, vulnerability, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and working with a collaborative spirit are really challenging things to do. The public liaison, trust-building work of a police chief is important enough that I cannot, in good faith, support this reappointment, and very much look forward to the day when we hire for someone with humility, who's not defensive and combative, who's an active listener and is eager to earn the trust of the community, who gives others the benefit of the doubt and is willing to make themselves vulnerable. Thank you.
Councillor Litwin.
I'll be brief. I'm very surprised that we've pulled Chief Murad off of the slate. I agree with Councillor Carpenter and other councillors who have said that the mayor is entitled to and should be able to appoint those who she feels is best to do the job and can work with her day in and day out to achieve both her goals and our shared community goals. What I'll just briefly say, other folks have already said reasonable things. I said this at the City Employees Union debate, and I'll say it again, city employees deserve stability and not to be put in the middle of politics. Particularly at this moment. It was brought up that there was a suggestion that maybe Chief Murad is the reason we can't retain officers. I would challenge that and say, I'd like to see the employee exit survey data. I could think of a bunch of reasons why people might not be retained here. Some of them might be the insufficient building that was mentioned at the last meeting that people have complained about and said is a problem. They have a difficult and exhausting policing situation requiring a lot of overtime when nearby towns just don't have that situation. And additionally, at times this council has been adversarial towards police and policing and has worked to undermine the police department. So I guess I would imagine that there are many reasons we could pontificate on why officers might not be retained, but we would want to study that, and I'd like to see the exit survey data. The department supports him, his officers support him, and if we really want to hurt recruitment and retention, this is the way to do it. So he has the support of his officers, and the urgent, critical nature of this crisis demands continuity. And we're lucky, honestly, that he's willing to stay on for another appointment. And I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Litwin. Councillor Doherty and Councillor Broderick.
Thank you, President Travers. I just want to address three things that have been raised, and partly in reiteration of some of the things that I've already heard. One is our institutional role as a city council in reviewing and approving mayoral appointments. The second one is this question of retention of members of the police department. And then the third is more generally Chief Murad's functioning as a leader of our police department during these incredibly difficult times. With respect to the first issue, our institutional role, I thought about this a lot last year in my first year as a city council person when we went through this process. Clearly, this body is not a rubber stamp for any mayor's appointments, and I don't think any of us view our role as a rubber stamp, and I certainly don't review my role as a rubber stamp. But I agree with many of the other counselors who have said that a mayor, regardless of political party, deserves the team that he or she is most comfortable with. The mayor is our chief executive officer. She is the one who works with the city department heads day in and day out, has to work with them, and is in the best institutionally positioned, is the best institutionally positioned person or office within the city to make the appointments and make them knowingly and intentionally. And so, at least from my perspective, there is a high bar for me to vote against a prospective appointment by this mayor or by any mayor. And I very much appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into this slate by our mayor, who has had so much to do over the last 2 months. Two, with respect to retention, we are regularly reminded, and rightfully so on this body, that data and information and evidence-based policymaking is the best course. Those are sentiments that I agree with. And I don't believe, I'm not aware of any data or evidence that suggests that the Burlington Police Department's retention levels are out of line with other police departments in Vermont or in our region, let alone even a single shred of evidence to suggest that Chief Murad's leadership is either directly or indirectly related to any retention problems. If there is some evidence of that, by all means, let's bring it forward. But particularly when it comes to the question of appointments, I do not think we should be proceeding via anecdote. Thirdly, with respect to Chief Murad's role and his commitment to the city and his accomplishments and perhaps shortcomings as a city leader, I do think it's worth taking a step back and reminding ourselves of the context in which Chief Murad has served our city. In 2020, going into 2020, we were enjoying roughly an annual average of about 100 police officers. In 2020, that number dropped into the 50s, I believe, over an incredibly short period of time. Chief Murad wrote a memorandum in 2020, which I refer everyone to, predicting what the police department would look like with a short staffing situation, and that memorandum is prescient to say the least. And he, in his role as deputy chief and as acting chief and as appointed chief, has steered the police department through an unprecedented not only diminution in the size of the police department, but a rise in crime and criminal-related activities across all arenas, and has still managed to stabilize the city, continue to solve major crimes, including murders, including cold case murders from decades ago, along with all of the other tasks that are required from the chief of police. If there's a person in the city who works more hours in any given week than Chief Murad, it's a small number of people in any rate. And I think that any particular anecdote about any particular instance needs to be taken into account, or needs to take into account the greater picture. So at least for myself, I will certainly be voting to confirm this appointment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. I have Councilor Broderick up next. Is there any other councilor that has not spoken on the reappointment of the chief who would like to after Councilor Broderick? You've spoken before, Councilor Newbeezer, so let's go to Councilor Broderick and then we'll consider a second round. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. All I am going to say is that when talking to my constituents, regardless of whether or not each of my constituents, regardless of their opinion on the institution that is policing and the institution that is law enforcement, the one commonality that I got in their responses is a fundamental mistrust and lack of faith in any sort of public safety in our city. Many of my constituents have stories for me of their apartments getting broken into and receiving no response, and other stories such as that. And whether or not, whatever the reason behind the scenes that causes events like that, where people cannot get a hold of law enforcement, people cannot get the help that they need in any sort of arena, that fundamental mistrust in our institutions will remain. And in my opinion, the only way to start rebuilding that trust as we plan to rebuild our public safety infrastructure is a change in leadership. So I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Councilor Shannon?
Yes, I think it's no secret that I will be voting yes. But after all that has been said here, I really want to thank the chief for sticking with us in the hardest of times. He stuck with us when this body was voting to defund bulletproof vests. He stuck with us when this body was voting to defund practice taser cartridges. And he stuck with us when this body reduced the number of police officers without any appropriate data to justify that. He stuck with us through all of that. He accurately predicted, as Councilor Doherty said, he accurately predicted what would happen from that point, and it did. The chief has the support of his officers, which is absolutely essential at this point in time. He is the glue that is holding this department together. And I understand that you may have some legitimate concerns. You may think things should be done differently. We're in really hard and unprecedented times. And maybe nobody has exactly the right answer on how to handle every given situation. And maybe there is room for improvement for everyone. And I think it's fair to have some of those discussions. I want to say, I particularly think that Councilor Kane's comments earlier about public safety and maybe a different way to structure our responses, that's really fair. But if we're going to think about why is it hard to recruit officers in Burlington and why do they sometimes go to other departments in the area, I think you should rewind the tape on these meetings sometimes. I think this is a department that needs our support, and I think this is a department that supports the chief. And he absolutely has my commitment, my trust, and I look forward to continue to work with him to find solutions to the problems that we have today. And I'm very glad that the mayor is willing to continue to work with him to find solutions to really difficult problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. We are at time with the time that we had allotted for the purposes of this agenda item. Councilors Kane and Doherty had already used their 5 minutes. Can I get a sense, though, of the councilors that wanted to speak a second time to this matter? I see Councilor Grant and Councilor Newbeezer. And Councilor Kane, you've used your 5 minutes to this item, so I will turn to Councilor Grant and Councilor Newbeezer and provide just 2 minutes for a second round.
We have a terrible problem in the city where we are not policed equitably, which is why you have some parts of the city that strongly support the chief and other parts of the city that are deeply concerned. That's a problem, and we all need to care about that because it affects how members of our community feel toward our police officers, which then affects how they feel about serving this community. We have heard this over and over and over again, and I can't get some of you to understand, and I wonder why. He has not always listened to those community members despite the data backing up the racial disparities in policing that has occurred in our city. And when we look at some of our open lawsuits, regarding use of force, there has been a lack of empathy, and he has not listened to those in our community. When we talk about adversarial relationships, some people in our community, including myself, and I have the emails to back it up to the previous administration, to city attorney's office, we have experienced this. It is real in our community, and he has not listened. He has not listened to other concerns, especially around the drug crisis. There is meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting that was open, that was public, that was recorded, where we said we do not have a plan for the drug crisis. I could go on and on. I think we have to say, why do some people still feel this way? Now, we definitely have people over here, and we have people over here. The fact is, most people are here, and we can get more people. We can do that. With regards to retention, I'm not necessarily saying he is solely responsible for the retention issue, but as a chief of police, I know that I have asked repeatedly if we can deep dive this, and I agree looking at exit surveys. It is something that I have asked about as a police commissioner and as a city councilor, and I have those emails to back it up. So once again, I've been consistent for some time, and I would like the council as a whole to say, okay, we've got to come in and work together and work with the chief to address what's happening in parts of our city that's not happening in others, and why is there a difference? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Newbeezer, we'll do 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, and sorry to double dip, but I guess I just want to put a finer point on it because it surprised me to hear that there's people are surprised. I think I heard one counselor say that they are surprised that people are raising concerns, and I'll say, from my perspective, representing Ward 1, we have a large New American population. I went and knocked every door, particularly in the BHA and CHT housing areas of Ward 1 that are significant and growing. And when we talk about trust with community stakeholders, there's no trust. That's not a political talking point. That's not an ideological commitment. There's no trust. And there was trust with Del Pozo. So it's not a question of like there's this gap with police fundamentally. I encourage folks like go, frankly, and I mean I was shocked my first public safety committee meeting because I just sat there and it was like we couldn't have a productive conversation. And I just sat there quietly like, if this was my job, I would leave in a heartbeat if this was what was happening on a regular basis. And so, again, I am going to vote for this appointment. I do believe in continuity of government, and I do respect the mayor's ability to choose the department heads and have some sort of path to accountability. But yeah, I do think there's a culture issue in our police department, and culture starts at the top. And certainly I saw that with the previous mayor, which is why I want to see some sort of path forward and see some good faith effort from all sides. But yeah, I'll stop ranting. I mean, I just really quick, there was one door where I knocked on it, and I said, what issues are important to you? And this person just said, please, please, please do something about the police department, like over and over and over again. And so I can't sit here and not raise those.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Appreciate folks' understanding with respect to the 5-minute rule that we have on items. Councilor Kane, in respect to you, I think you had like 10 seconds left. You asked me if you could have one more sentence, so I will give you that one sentence. And then Councilor Barlow will give you 2 minutes, and then we'll go to a vote.
Thank you. Just super briefly, I want to respond to something Councilor Shannon said. Councilor Shannon said that Police Chief Murad has her trust. I think that doesn't matter whether he has our trust. It matters whether he has the community's trust.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Councilor Barlow, you'll have the last word on this, and then we'll go to a vote on both this reappointment and the slate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that we don't have to look any further than this body if we want to know why we have a recruitment and a retention problem at Burlington Police Department. It's these kind of conversations, I think, that chill any prospective new employee at BPD from wanting to come to work for us. We need to support the department as a body. And we need to reappoint Chief Murad because he supports them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Barlow. We are in a unique position this year where even those appointees that are taking on new positions are individuals who, for a number of years now, many, many decades collectively, have dedicated their lives in service to the city, and they are all deserving of our gratitude and respect. We are going to go to 2 votes here. Both will be roll call votes. The first will be on the reappointment of Police Chief Murad. The second then will be on the slate of the remaining appointees. And I would ask that councilors at the end of those votes, please join me in appropriately recognizing those who've been reappointed to their positions. The first vote then is on the divided question of the reappointment of John Murad as the Chief of Police. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilor Barlow?
Yes.
Councilor Broderick?
No.
Councilor Carpenter?
Yes.
Councilor Doherty?
Yes.
Councilor Grant?
No.
Councilor Kane?
No.
Councilor Litwin?
Yes.
Councilor McKnight?
Yes.
Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes.
Councilor Shannon?
Yes.
City Council President Travers?
Yes.
8 ayes, 3 nays, 1 absent.
Thank you very much. We will, and I will note for the record the absence of Councilor Bergman. The second vote is on the remainder of the slate of the mayoral appointments. And will the clerk please call the roll on that motion?
Councilor Barlow?
Yes.
Councilor Broderick?
Yes.
Councilor Carpenter?
Yes.
Councilor Doherty?
Yes.
Councilor Grant?
Yes.
Councilor Kane?
Yes.
Councilor Litwin?
Yes.
Councilor McKnight?
Yes.
Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes.
Councilor Shannon?
Yes.
City Council President Travers?
Yes.
11 ayes, 1 absent.
Congratulations to the mayor's appointments.
President Travers?
Yes, Attorney
Just for
McNeil.
the record, I think it would be good to indicate not only congratulations, but the result of the vote that the slate and the chief have been confirmed.
Yes, on the reappointment of Chief Murad by a vote of 8 yeses, 3 noes, and 1 absent, the reappointment of Chief Murad is confirmed as the Chief of Police. On the remainder of the slate, with 11 yeses, 0 noes, and 1 absent, the remainder of the mayoral's appointments for the coming year are confirmed. Good by you, Attorney McNeil? Okay. Thank you, and thank you to all the appointments that were in attendance this evening. I know some of you have other items before the council, so appreciate those of you who have the opportunity to leave now. That then brings us to item 6.2 on our agenda, and it's one of our newly reappointed department heads, Director Pine, who is up on this item. Director Pine. As Director Pine takes his seat, this is item 6.2, a resolution authorization to submit 2024-2028 Burlington 5-year consolidated plan, 2024 Burlington 1-year action plan. This comes to us with the unanimous support of the Board of Finance. And Director Pine, if you could please introduce yourself and anyone else who's speaking with you.
Thank you. For the record, it's Brian Pine, the Director of the city's Community and Economic Development Office.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Lawrence Gomez. I am the Housing Programs Manager for CEDO. Thank you.
We are before you tonight to ask for approval of what is referred to at the federal government as the consolidated plan.
in addition, our annual plan, our action plan, which is how we're proposing to allocate federal dollars. It's important, I think, just to note that the consolidated plan is a 5-year plan, and it sets priorities for how we will in the future look at proposals for allocating community development block grant and home investment partnership funds. We have, I covered some history with the Board of Finance. I think the most important salient point of those remarks was that in 1982, Burlington became a community development block grant community, meaning we received this money directly from the federal government. And a year later, CEDO was created, and at that time, we were getting just north of $1 million. And if you factored in inflation from 1983 to today, the city would be getting a little over $3 million. We're getting $730,000 for all of the pressing community development challenges that we face around affordable housing, economic development, homelessness, public services, which are essentially human services, hunger, homelessness, you name it. So we're really seeing the federal resources decrease. At the same time, we have home funds, which were enacted under the 1990 Cranston-Gonzalez Affordable Housing Act. We started out at about $730,000, and the year we became a home participating jurisdiction was 2004. So if you factored in over the last 20 years inflation, we'd be looking at a home allocation of approximately $2.5 million, and we are now looking at home funds at about $350,000. So the needs continue to grow and far outpace our resources. The federal funds to support this work have declined precipitously. It means we face major challenges to meet those needs. Nonetheless, we do a planning process, and I want to say hats off to Rebecca Lawrence Gomez, who is here tonight with me, Todd Rawlings, Christine Curtis, and Beth Whitlock, who is not here tonight, but Christine is with us in case any questions come up. I'm going to let Rebecca, who did a significant chunk of the work involved in our outreach and community engagement process, just talk about the priorities and the needs that we found talking to our community.
Thank you, Brian. I do have a presentation that accompanies the information we're sharing, and we're happy to take questions as we go along. I will be speedy, but hopefully not too speedy. So as Director Pine introduced, the funds that we're discussing today and the plan that we're proposing and requesting you adopt is based on funding we receive for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. You can see our current grant year awards. These will be anticipated for July 1st of this year. And the consolidated plan is built around 3 main sections. We look at a needs assessment of what our community needs, a market analysis that looks at data points that are collected and provided primarily by HUD, and then a strategic plan around how are we going to do our best to address the needs based on the market and other information that we have. And then the action plan is a single-year plan about how we might dispense those funds to, again, meet the priorities of our community. We are requesting a motion this evening. I'm not going to linger here. It's in the packet in the memo. We'll be asking you to proceed with that later. An overview of the system for HUD, the consolidated plan happens every 5 years, so it's a pretty large chunk of time. And that looks at an overview of the housing and community development needs for the city of Burlington. The action plan is annual. Again, what are the steps we're going to take to address those needs? And then we will come back and present to you in the fall our consolidated annual performance and evaluation report, which is what happened over the past year. So it's a report looking at what did our investments bring about. Timeline of this consolidated plan: in September through March, we engaged in a community needs assessment. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We presented a draft plan for public comment here on April 3rd. Today we're asking for approval and received approval from the Board of Finance, thank you folks, and requesting approval from you all, and we plan to submit the report to HUD at the end of this week. So for an outreach, we did an online survey. Some folks in this room, I'm guessing, completed it. Thank you. We had over 1,000 people visit, check out the survey, and 190, more than 100, yeah, 890, thank you. 890,
pretty significant difference. 890 responses and over 400 written comments. So I would say that the community was very engaged. People want to talk about what's happening in the city. They want to talk about what is and isn't working for them. We also completed in-person dot surveys. I'll show you what one of those looks like. You might have seen them if you were visiting the bathrooms downstairs or perhaps the library. We also had some in community centers, our youth center, our center for folks with mental health issues. We spoke with over 120 individuals and 39 different organizations, coalitions, and groups. This gives you a little visual of the feedback we received from the online survey, wherein people identified what were their priorities. Things that stand out through this chart really, right? Affordable housing, experiences of homelessness, access to mental health services, safety, substance use, and then again, other areas where people were invested but less of an area of focus. This is an example of one of the dot surveys. This was hanging in the library, and there were the little sticky dots available, and folks were actually quite interactive. You can see that people not only placed their stickers, gave us feedback, but also wrote some notes around what they thought we needed. This is another one of the dot surveys. This one came from the Community Resource Center, a place where folks can go to seek food assistance, have a warm place to stay during the day. And again, you see a pretty strong emphasis on affordable housing, experiences of homelessness, mental health, public safety, et cetera. Again, our recurrent feedback are things that are probably not surprising to any of you, but folks are identifying housing and housing affordability. There's not enough of it, and it costs too much. Reflections about safety and feeling safe in the community. Comments around needles in places where folks are frequenting. Approaches by strangers, so unwanted, unsolicited, aggressive approaches, graffiti, the prevalence of gun violence in our community. The experience of homelessness, both the visibility and concern for folks who are experiencing homelessness and uncertainty on how we might address it, and then the intensity of needs of folks that people are encountering either in their work or just in the community in general. Concerns around substance use, open use, perceptions and experiences of a lack of options. So we heard from multiple service providers that they're working with someone's interested in services and supports and is unable to access it. Also, there are new and different drugs that are impacting people's bodies differently. Folks in the medical center commented on some of the medical experiences that folks are coming in with and an incapacity or a limited capacity to support people fully with their needs. And then again, mental health. So concerns about one's own mental health, family members' mental health, and observations about mental health behaviors and challenges that folks are having in the community. Based on this feedback process, based on the information we received from HUD, we identified these areas of priority need: affordable housing, addressing the homelessness, community services and safety, economic development, public facilities and infrastructure improvements, and then public planning and administration. And you'll see underneath these priority needs, we do, as part of the process, identify specific goals. I won't dwell on these, but as you can imagine, they're related to the larger needs, right? How do we address our housing problem? By creating housing, by improving the housing we have, by supporting people who are struggling to maintain their housing or access housing, et cetera. And we go down through each one: homelessness, community services and safety, economic development, et cetera. So based on the process that Director Pine mentioned earlier, here is the overview of the requested and suggested development awards for the Community Development Block Grant. These are different projects within the city who have requested assistance for either economic support, business development, physical space, the Community Resource Center, as was mentioned earlier, the Ethan Allen residence, technical assistance for microenterprises. Additional projects that are planning to be funded through the CDBG grants are public service awards. There's a limitation on how much of the funding can go towards public services. And you'll see the majority of services that are being funded in part through these monies are ones that support folks in our community who are facing the greatest barriers to navigating situations. So folks who are fleeing experiences of domestic violence, folks who are experiencing homelessness, folks who are exiting in carceral settings and are working on their substance use and what the relationship with that might be, support for families, and also a training program for people who are interested in personal care assistant work. This is, again, the overall just funding summary for 2024. You see there are some carry forward funds from previous years. Those will be expended either this fiscal year or the following fiscal year. Basically, all the funds that come in are consistently committed. We just have to have kind of a gap sometimes in when projects actually take off or are completed. Okay.
Now it's back to you.
Back to you.
All right. Thank you very much for all the engagement with our community and that presentation. Before turning to the council for any comments or questions, we do have the authorizing resolution posted to Civic Clerk, and I'd like to turn to the chair of our CDNR committee for a motion related to that resolution.
Let's make sure I do it right. I move that we waive the reading and adopt the resolution.
Thank you very much, Councilor Newbeezer. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Councilor Newbeezer, do you wish for the floor back on this item?
No, I'm all right. Thank you, though.
Okay. Are there any other councilors that have comments or questions? Councilor Carpenter.
I just want to repeat the comment I made at Finance about how miserable these funds are to work with and how much work Rebecca had to do on this consolidated plan. And I was interested, somebody at one of our public meetings said about getting to work using all our HUD funds. And when I've been doing this almost 40 years, this is all our HUD funds. And so I'm only editorially commenting about this is what we get from the federal government. And I certainly support it. But
I would
You have a comment, Director Pine?
Two other sources. Just, I don't want to, in case HUD watches, I want to just clarify. Two things. We get competitive money under the HUD Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Reduction Program. We're very competitive. I launched that program in 2003. We've received 21 years of funding since then and have addressed over 750 homes, and we're going to keep at it. The other is the Continuum of Care, which is to serve homelessness. That's a competitive funding program that we receive HUD funds for. So we do get a little bit more, but Councilor Carpenter's point is very well taken. For a lot of work, it's a very small amount of money.
You, Director Pine, Councilor Kane, and then Councilor Litwin, and then Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. It was really interesting reading the report. I recommend the report to the public. It's probably a bit dry and long for most people, but there is a lot in there. Just good data on housing, market rate housing, just what housing we have in the city. Good breakdowns by socioeconomic class, race. I do recommend that everyone read it. It did raise, just reading it did raise, or skimming it, if I'm being honest, did raise some questions for me, and I'm not sure you guys would be able to elaborate, but for instance, there's reference to 2019 data that there were only 17 owner-occupied homes owned by Black households, and so that was 0.3% of the population versus 7%. 7% of the population are Black and 0.3% are homeowners. So I am wondering if you guys can comment on the CHT shared equity program or other efforts and how things might have changed since 2019.
When that data came out, there were a number of folks who said, it was a bit head scratching. Honestly, the sample size is so small that being certain that the data is accurate is challenging. And so there's some real caveats when it comes to census data for groups, population groups that are very small. But having said that, it's not an exaggeration to say that if you are in this community and you are African American, you have faced significant barriers to securing housing, both homeownership and rental. And there's different factors affecting that, but it's a very real issue that we need to sharpen. We need to get our focus on how to address certainly the issue of Black homeownership specifically, more generally BIPOC homeownership, but Black households specifically face hurdles and have continuously faced hurdles that go very far back in time, and we need to
do something more focused on that area for sure. We have challenges with using federal funds for that because it gets into these issues of fair housing, which get really complicated, but CHT has found a way to ameliorate that issue and has been able to assist households directly. And there's some real promising work there.
Thank you. Then in another section, there's reference to, I think, rebate programs for landlords who charge below market rates. So I think there's reference to federal and state programs, but I'm wondering at the local level if we are doing anything or if we can do anything, because I have heard the notion from some, mom and pop landlords who are wondering if the government can do something to further, incentivize that sort of thing.
The city doesn't have any subsidy programs that support people directly with their monthly rent or their housing expenses, and people would definitely be eligible to support households who are receiving subsidies. If you know any landlords who might be interested in working with a household who has a subsidy, there are a significant number of people who receive state and federal housing subsidies who are struggling to find affordable units. So I would say first off, literally feel free to send people my way. I'd be happy to do a little connection there to help folks match those two groups up. And then secondary to that, that's something the city could certainly explore or look at a little bit further, not with these funds, most likely, but we're always looking to how can we support our landlords, how can we incentivize and support unique and creative ways to assist people in getting housing.
And we don't have a specific, a rebate available to owners of rental property who agree to keep rents more affordable. That's not a policy that we've ever had, but it's certainly something I think worth looking into. As Rebecca mentioned, there are usually, unfortunately, between 100 and 200 households who have literally vouchers that entitle them to rental assistance that they can't find a unit to use the rental assistance in because units are too expensive and you have to be within what's called the payment standard to get in the door even to consider an apartment. It has to meet housing quality standards, which is actually fairly similar to minimum housing, so it's about the same as the city's code standards. But when it comes to prices, the payment standards are way below fair market rents now, really.
Thank you. There's also reference to a lead hazard control grant and a healthy homes grant that I think both work on lead for the most part, which reminded me that when I knocked on doors, I heard from some tenants concerns about electrical. Some people just saying that there's going to be a bad fire here, eventually, and the city really needs to intervene. And so I'm wondering if there are similar grants for other things other than lead or asbestos.
Sure. The lead funds are specific for lead hazards, and the Healthy Homes funds really deal with the other healthy housing challenges. Moisture, so you get ventilation fans. We can deal with floors that are rotting. We can deal with a number of things with the Healthy Homes funds. We don't have money available for electrical upgrades. That is primarily done through the enforcement side of city government. So DPI and the folks who do code enforcement is really how we get at that issue. There is a state program, though, the VHIP program, which is the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, and there's a state resource available to do those types of upgrades. There is a quid pro quo. You have to agree to keep your rents reasonably affordable for some period of time, but it's 5 years, I think, 5-year affordability. So it's not major, but we have the upkeep of our rental housing is a significant challenge. We have extremely old housing stock, and that's a constant challenge.
Thank you. There's good data on homelessness. There's good data on the capacities of different programs, different places where folks can go during the day or to sleep. I'm wondering if there's data on wait lists, sizes, that kind of thing. I don't think that was in there, and I'm just wondering if that data is something that you guys might have.
This will need to be the last question, Councilor Kane.
Yeah, the Housing Authority keeps a wait list of folks who have applied for housing subsidy and haven't been able to access or utilize it yet. And then different housing providers, affordable housing providers, also have lists.
Thank you. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. We have Councilor Litwin and then Councilor Shannon.
Thanks. I have just a couple questions, and thanks a lot. The report, like Councilor Kane said, is illuminating. I just have a couple questions about specifically the DOT survey that you did, which was fascinating. As a recovering social scientist, I zoomed in on all the handwritten write your own answers. And so I saw the section about recurring feedback, and I wondered if you could just quickly summarize what you mean by that. How do you collect that? Is this, I'll leave that there.
Yeah, sure. So as you saw, we met with, I think, like 39 different organizations and groups and such, and that varied from Association of Africans Living in Vermont to the UVM Emergency Department to our various social service, street outreach, pathways, the Community Resource Center,
Right.
kind of trying to get a mix of folks, and took notes about every meeting we had, and then just kind of looked for, and again, look for what are themes, what are things that people are saying frequently and often. So that's where housing, almost across the board, we talked to, again, 124 people, 123 mentioned housing, right? And then same with public safety. I think I had 100, out of the 39 groups, I think 35 mentioned wanting to feel safe in their community and having concerns about how safe they did or didn't feel. So those were sort of our, again, thematic assessments.
Thank you. And so the sub-points under safety, and I have to agree, I live in a CHT-owned building myself, so I'm really supportive of affordable housing initiatives. Under safety, we have 4 bullet points. Can you tell me more about why you chose needles, approaches by strangers, graffiti, and gun violence, and if there was anything else that got left out?
Sure. Again, back to those were the 4 that we heard most frequently, and I would say across the widest range of representation. So again, looking for variety and people speaking both from their professional perspectives as well as personal perspectives, right? So someone at the hospital is a good example. We're sharing about their encounters with folks who are coming in with wounds that are related to injections that are getting infected, and then also sharing as a mom, when they walk their kid to school, they're keeping an eye out for avoiding needles on the street, right? So holding both of those perspectives. Other concerns were, as any of us could imagine and maybe experience ourselves, whether it's, late at night and wanting to feel safe getting home after they've closed down their favorite place of, their favorite drinking place or whatever that might look like. Questions and concerns around connection and feeling like they know people and that they can talk to people and have those kind of connections with the community. Concerns around people being yelled at, some things with like vehicles driving by quickly, lights on in the evening, vehicles being messed around with, feeling like one has to lock their doors and their windows and their garage and all the elements of their homes.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important for this council to really take that in, to take in what an exhaustive study this was, how extensive it was, how much work went into identifying a wide variety of highly respected community stakeholder organizations to consult with. And these are the 4, I'm looking at safety. There's certainly other things here under substance use, homelessness that are important. And I think it's important that when we're talking about public safety, we are focusing in on these things: needles, approaches by strangers, graffiti, gun violence, and those things that are interrelated to that. And so I appreciate your time, but when I'm thinking about public safety, this is what I'm thinking about. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Councilor Shannon?
Thank you, President Travers. I want to agree with Councilor Kane that this is a really interesting read, and also admit that I haven't dived deep into the 200 pages yet, but I will get there. And also acknowledge what Councilor Carpenter said. It's a lot of work for the amount of money that we get. And Councilor Litwin, that it's not just the money that we get, it's the value to our community that of all the work that you have done here. I think that this is what starts to light the path as we try to figure out public safety. So one of the things that I found interesting, the needs assessment is very interesting. And I have, and you don't necessarily have an answer to this, but I wonder if it's something that's being thought about or investigating, or if you disagree, that's okay too. But in that needs study, it shows that overcrowded housing is surprisingly rare. Even in the lowest income range and among people who are really struggling with cost, only 40 households were experiencing overcrowding out of, well, I think it's 3,000 something total and high 2000s. Why are we, and other communities that I have experienced that are having housing shortages, they have overcrowded housing. Why are we not seeing overcrowded housing as we have this profound housing shortage? And just for time, I want to get everything out there at once. My second question is it, there was a clear need in the homeless category, and I know affordable housing and homelessness. I'm astounded that our community thinks it's okay to empty shelters when the weather gets better. It seems to me that people need shelter year-round. Can these funds, and I know that you typically, you have kind of your things that you fund through this, year after year, less funds. Can these funds be used for shelters?
Sure. I would reflect around the overcrowding a couple of immediate thoughts. One is that data is from
I don't know if we might be able to hear you better if you pull in your mic.
Closer to you.
Okay. Is that a little better?
Is that better?
I think that mic in particular, you have to be very close.
Very, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that one is a little better. In terms of overcrowding, that data does come from HUD and is slightly dated. I think it was 2013 to 2017. One thing I would say through observation and conversations with folks, et cetera, is landlords can be very discerning around to whom they rent. And so folks who maybe at one time may have had a group living together or been living with friends, I think many of us, anybody who's looked for housing in Burlington knows it is incredibly competitive. So if and when a landlord has an option between choosing between one quiet soul who makes gobs of money, I would assume, and data seems to show that that's where they're trending. So is it possible folks aren't overcrowding because there just aren't folks to overcrowd with? That we are in such a short supply of housing and have so much demand for every unit that the demographic is arguably shifting in our city, or potentially shifting. So, and we do find statistically we are very small households. I think the average size of a household in Burlington is 2 point just barely something. So we're not even 2.5 folks anymore. So again, our average household size is much smaller. And there are families, I do feel like I should say, because it is reflected in our report, but also there are families in our community who are large families and are intergenerational families, and they are struggling, just absolutely having no luck finding housing in our community, and we're losing them. And that impacts our diversity, that impacts who we are as a community, what we're made of. So I think that also is very important. I'm not saying we need 400 5-bedroom homes, but there are families that do need places where they can live together and live. So I think that is relevant. And the second question, I'll let Brian answer.
The second one was really about, can we use this money for shelters? And I think a member of this council at a recent meeting said the cost of operating the winter shelter was incredibly high. And it's true, it was incredibly high. In order to provide the level of support and services and achieve the level of safety that people staying there and the staff working there need and deserve, you really need a high level of staffing. So we would certainly be allowed to use these funds, not the home funds, but the CDBG funds for shelter provision. I think it would use up
We have what's called public service money, which is a teeny little bit of this money, 15%. 15% of the total amount is public service. That's what shelter money would have to come from. So it'd be a small amount. We get about $140,000 a year of public service dollars. So it wouldn't go very far to provide shelter. That's our challenge. Fortunately, the state just put out a request for proposals for shelter. As a housing person, I don't like shelter. I don't think it's a solution, but it's a necessity right now. So we're going to discuss internally how much of those additional shelter dollars we seek. In addition to continuing to operate at Elmwood, we need more shelter capacity. And I'll say that over and over again, even if it's unpopular.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Does any other councilor wish to speak to the motion? Okay, seeing no one, Councilor Grant.
Thank you. So with regards to overcrowding, I guess it's what is the definition? I definitely, in my 2 wards that I serve, I see lease violations all the time, especially with college students. They convert living rooms to sleeping areas. They convert other spaces that are not meant to be quote unquote bedrooms as sleeping areas, and they have a lot of people that are off the lease. So that is, it may not be considered quote unquote overcrowding, but it is definitely happening a lot.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Seeing no other councilors in the queue. Yep, Councilor Litwin, just a minute.
Even less.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask one last question that's come up. I've certainly had constituents talk to me about it, which is shocking rental increases at the end of leases because we have no protections to stop that. As far as I'm aware, in Vermont or in the city. And so I wondered, has your research talked about that at all and what that's done, particularly in a market where we have 0.5% vacancy rate and people are trapped in their apartments and property owners know that. And I've had people contact me at $150, $300 a month increases, and what that means for somebody could mean homelessness, could mean disruption in many other ways. So,
I don't think we included in our findings a whole lot on the exorbitant rent increases. The fact is they're happening and we have no recourse other than hopefully providing enough assistance to those folks who will be hit hard and encouraging production of new units. But even though unit production continues to increase, we're not seeing it drop off in terms of exorbitant rent increases. So we don't have, Vermont does not allow municipalities to in any way regulate rents. So let's just say, people wonder, why don't we? And in winter, you can raise rents, you can evict people in winter, you can do all of that. It's all permissible, sorry.
Okay. I'm sorry, Councilor Kane, both you and Councilor Shannon are at time with 5 minutes. If you just have another sentence, again, we can go to that, but I think we need to go to a vote here.
Okay, yeah, just a sentence, just in response to what Councilor Shannon said about the lack of overcrowding. I think part of it might be the high standard. The definition I think HUD uses is 1.51 plus people per room, which is a very high standard if you think about it. And then also, I think like the 2.17 people per household average in Burlington is kept low or is pushed down, by the lack of housing. And then, people with kids, they move to the suburbs. And so it's this suburban sprawl that I think, we create sort of maybe rather than the overcrowding to some extent.
Okay, Councilor Kane. Councilor Shannon, did you have any response to that? Or okay, we will go to a vote then with no other councilors in the queue. The motion by Councilor Newbeezer is to waive the reading and adopt the resolution. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 6.3. The council has been receiving annual reports from our various boards and commissions, and we have invited any board or commission that wishes to come to present to the full council to do so here in person, and we did receive that request from our electric commission, and I believe that we have members of the electric commission here with us, and would invite you to please come to the table for the purposes of this presentation. If you could just please introduce yourself for the record.
Madam Mayor, President Travers, City Councilors, good evening, and thank you for having me here. My name is Scott Moody. I'm a Ward 2 resident, and I've been on the Burlington Electric Commission for 14 years now, currently serving as chair. I'm very nervous, so hopefully I can sort of croak out my comments to you tonight. I just want to start with, I hope that all of you read our executive summary here of the activities we've been involved in the last year. A few things that I want to highlight to the council. One being, the topmost being the financial stability of the department, something that the commission takes very seriously, and we do a fairly deep dive in that every month. And as folks from the financial end of things on your part probably know, this past year, fiscal year, has been very challenging for BED, with a very light winter, and just energy prices that are just wildly fluctuating. And I just want to point out that the department and the folks across all departments within the department have done an excellent job in keeping tabs on that and getting us through some really tough months. There was a number of months when we would walk into a meeting and be really scared about what they were going to tell us about how things were. And fortunately, the folks there have been able to look through their cloudy crystal balls and bring us to a place today where we're in a pretty good financial position, despite some very scary months along the way to this time. Just so some of you know, that there's some new commissioners here, or some new counselors here. Part of a lot of what we do is we're a 5-commission board that oversees the department. We oversee policy, power purchases, street lighting, among other things. And everything on here and everything listed in here and more on your behalf. To that end, in terms of the financials, one of the things that we concentrate every month on are the Moody's indices for our credit rating, which is associated and related to the city's credit rating, and so we try to keep very close tabs on that. As some of you might remember, a number of years ago, a couple administrations ago now, where the city had some issues with their credit rating, and so we keep close tabs on that because we know ours is interrelated, and we want to make sure that we're all in good shape with those folks. And so I just want to commend Emily and her team, and really all the teams across Burlington Electric for being really, really diligent through a really tough year financially. I hate to bring up the specter of climate change, but in my 14 years or so doing this, I've certainly seen where the department forecasts and their analyses of costs have changed, and that's really been relative to particularly our winters becoming milder and milder over time. A couple of other things that I want to bring up that we've talked about this year. One of the lighting, city lighting that I just mentioned. Not one of our favorite subjects to tackle, and so fortunately, what we've had some citizen engagement with how the department goes about changing lighting across neighborhoods, and as a result, we've been able to work with the department and folks to come up with a way that there's a bit more public engagement before the department goes to any particular neighborhood to change out lighting, and hopefully with the idea that it doesn't come to us. And so far that's been fairly successful, and I think there's been good department reach out to neighborhoods where lights are being changed out, and the look of that neighborhood is being altered and can be concerning to folks. So that's been really good. The other thing, there's a subject you guys are going to talk about momentarily about miscellaneous fees. and that's going to come up here in a bit. I just want to talk about that briefly as, from my perspective, it was one of the most ways where we really can see local government and representative, people like myself and my board, working with our constituents to find solutions to things. So the miscellaneous fees that you're going to talk about have really not been looked at for a while, longer than we thought, actually. They hadn't been looked at since we moved over to AMI, and should have been, honestly. It's kind of a whoops. But one of our residents here, Alan Bierke, brought that to our attention. Alan's a local small landlord, brought it to our attention, and the department took a deep dive on it. And what we found out, and what they found out, is that the more they started looking into these miscellaneous fees, the more questions it brought, and the more they had to do some analysis of whether or not those fees were correct and just, including looking at other electric utilities and see what they're charging. And it came out that that really did need to change and adjust some of those fees. And what it told me was that there truly was a need to take a look at this. And I think what you've got in front of you tonight to look at as an update of those fees is much more in line with what the actual cost is to do those services, as well as trying to keep in line with other utilities that are also finding these fees to be needed to go about their business. And I guess what I really wanted to highlight about that, because it did come from a ratepayer and went through our board and went through the department, and it just, to me, seemed like a local government working the way it should, and that was a real kind of a good feel-good thing about that. Let's see here. A couple of other things that I personally that we feel really good about is I want to thank the department for utilizing Vermont Language Justice and taking a lot of documents and things about your electric bill and how to work that and translating it into a number of different languages. And that really helps the folks who I can't imagine trying to look at an electric bill if you can't even speak the language, much less understand what all those little fees and things in here are. And the department's done a fantastic job with that, as well as the EAP program that hopefully the public service department will agree with and help us to get some more lower income folks able to get assistance to help their on their electric bills. That's something that we really feel good about, and it is really in keeping with the department's mission. And another sort of feel-good thing. Let's see here. There's been a lot of talk about McNeil and what its value is to the community. I certainly have my own feelings on that. I think McNeil is worth keeping around, is a vital resource. I don't think a lot of people understand about it is that with it not running, we are relying on fossil fuels. And when it runs, we take fossil fuels out of the mix. And with it being so close to transmission and our ability to turn that on and off at will, I don't think enough people realize the economic, what's the word I'm looking for, benefit of that in being able to chart our own course. When you get hot days like this in the summer and market prices spike, well, we have a weapon against that, and that's McNeil. I think I'll just leave it at that as far as that goes. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, those are some of the highlights that I wanted to bring up. Was just some of the things. Just know that all the things that we put on here are things that we discuss and keep track on for you folks. You know, the financial stability of the department and where it's heading is super important to all of us. Also, I'd like to commend the department on their steadfast commitment to our net zero 2030 net zero goals. It's a difficult goal. It's a struggle. It's a challenge, but I think it's one that the department and this commission is up for. And hopefully with your support, you know, we can be, you know, some of those shining lights across the globe that are doing the right thing in this regard. Those are kind of the things that I wanted to highlight. Not sure if you have any questions, and if you do, I hope they're not too technical. Otherwise, I might need to call General Manager Springer, because his knowledge of these things is far more greater than mine. I just did want to at least say that I do appreciate, and I hope the people of Burlington appreciate that there are people in cubicles and whatnot down at 585 Pine over at McNeil that are heroes, unsung heroes. There are people that nobody knows about that are viciously fighting for this city and fighting to keep our electric rates down and keep this your rates affordable. I also want to make sure that I point out and appreciate the line workers, those guys you see out there in the yellow trucks and that nice new green and white electric one. Appreciate the work that those folks are doing. It is yeoman's work, and I don't think those folks are appreciated enough. And I just want to make sure that before I leave, I call to your attention the great work that these folks are doing. And I would invite any other discussion or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Moody. I'm mindful of the fact that we have General Manager Springer and some other folks from BED who will be taking your seat right after you. So if folks have technical substantive questions, certainly we can punt them to them. But thank you for your service as well, and thank you. If I'm not mistaken here, Scott, you've served on the Electric Commission for 14 years.
14 years now, sir. My current position ends up in 2 years, which will make it a total of 16. At which point I might let somebody else get the time in here. But
thank you very much for your service to the Electric Commission. Thank you to your fellow commissioners, Bethany Whitaker, Laura Bond, James Chagnon, and Andy Voda. We have all received your excellent report here, which is posted to Civic Clerk. We'll turn to councilors if they have any questions or comments on the report. I know folks have had an opportunity to review it. Councilor Kane.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you appreciate the department's steadfast commitment to the net zero 2030 goals. So I just wanted to touch base on that. There was a presentation that I think Director Springer, or General Manager Springer, gave to this body in mid-April, and I think the same presentation came before your commission shortly beforehand. So there was some frustration expressed by this body just with the lack of data that would really give a good indication of, you know, how we've gotten to where we've gotten, what programs in particular might be driving the progress we made with the 18% or whatever it is, greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So I just wanted to follow up with you and see how you view that report, the data presented in April, or maybe it was March, to your commission, and just the standards you have for the department in terms of mostly data.
Councilor Kane, I mean, Chair Moody, you're welcome to answer the question, but I recognize that you're here to provide the annual report on behalf of the commission, and I don't really want the council and you to get into a technical debate here. You're welcome to answer the question, but I think we should limit any further questions and comments here simply to the annual report and the work of your commission over the past year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, we get regular reports from General Manager Springer regarding and really I kind of rely on we have kind of a dashboard of priorities, and I think while challenging. I have the utmost confidence in General Manager Springer and the department to do as best as is humanly possible to keep up with what our goals and objectives are in trying to get towards that net zero by 2030 goal. It's not easy, and so what's my threshold of whether or not we get there or not? It's kind of an it's constantly as you can imagine. It's just a constantly evolving and changing landscape that needs to be sort of judged, if you will, as we go along. And I'm sure I can speak for the board that we're proud of and supportive of the efforts of the department to move along that path.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilor Kane. Councilor Grant?
Hi. To Councilor Kane's point, I think that, and I actually recently talked to Director Springer about public engagement, and just a consideration from the commission to monitor public engagement, because if we have all this good stuff happening, one, how are we telling people? How are we actually driving people to the website? And we talked about certain social media things that could be done to, and he was very responsive to that. But I think that might be something for the commission to be aware of. I think in general, the city as a whole can continue to do better with public engagement in terms of notifying the people of Burlington exactly what's happening. And I think that's the point isn't like a criticism, it's just to say, hey, we can take this next step so that people know like exactly what is driving the results, and also people driving more people to be aware of rebates and things like that, so they convert over to more electric and get away from fossil fuels. Thank you very much for your time and your presentation.
Sure. I think you bring up a question that I struggle with all the time. Working at Channel 17 is public engagement. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, sort of thing. I know the department regularly updates their Facebook, their North Avenue News. Darren and other representatives ends up at all the NPA meetings. We serve pizza at our meetings. Come have a slice with us sometime. To that effect, it makes me wonder why there aren't more people that show up at our meetings, and I get excited when people do, because usually when someone does show up at our meeting, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And that's usually ends up getting their attention. There's a part of me that hopes that we don't have a lot of people at our meetings because we are doing pretty well. But I do know that the department does engage in a number of social media, as well as face-to-face. As you can probably see here, we get out to the baseball games and to other things. And we're at Darren's at NPA, and so I think it's a great question. I don't know. It's the bigger question is how do you get more people civically engaged across the board?
Amen. I definitely hear about that, and I talk a lot about that. We had talked specifically about the underuse of certain social media channels, and I have since then seen more posts on there. I think it's meeting people where they are, and people in different age groups are prone to use different ways of getting their information, and just making sure we're hitting all those ways. But thank you so much for your feedback.
I'm not sure if the department has Instagram or any of those other more, but if they don't, they should. And I do know that they do some regular stuff over at Channel 17 as well. And the other thing is try to get out the word. This was, I believe, the second, maybe the third year the whole the gathering in the summer down at 585 Pine. To encourage people to get onto e-bike, all that sort of electrification stuff. And I found that going to that last year, it was far more attended than the first year or two. So I think it's a slow burn, but it is catching on. And I think if you look at the numbers of heat pumps and other things that people are if you look at those numbers month over. People are starting to slowly but surely catch on, but there's always room for improvement in communications, and given that that's what I do for a living, I wholeheartedly agree with you that any and all ways to sort of push that message and get people to know what is out there and available to them, particularly in terms of rebates for going electric. There's really no end to the amount of engagement that we can and should be out there, forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Moody. We are at time here, so we will go to a vote on the matter.
I didn't think I was going to take 20 minutes. That was a quick 20 minutes.
It goes by, time flies when you're having fun, Scott.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. The recommended action on the agenda is to waive the reading, accept the report, and place it on file. Is any counselor willing to make that motion? Moved by Counselor McKnight. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Grant. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you again, Scott.
Thank you, and thank you all for your service to the city of Burlington. Much appreciated.
Thank you for yours.
We next have a number of items to be presented by the Burlington Electric Department, as we mentioned previously. We have 82 minutes until 10:30, and our agenda has 85 minutes scheduled into it. So I think we are perfectly lined up to end right on time if we can stick to our schedule here. Item 6.4 is a presentation from the Burlington Electric Department. There are 3 sub-items under the matter. The first, the BED FY25 rate change. The second, a resolution approving the pledging of the credit of the city. And the third, proposed changes to BED miscellaneous service fees. General Manager Springer, my understanding is that you're here to make a presentation on all 3 of those items, and then councilors will have an opportunity to ask questions or make comments on that, and then I will at that point turn to Councilor Barlow for a motion on all 3 items. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you all very much. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the mayor and the council for our reappointment this evening, and also thank our chair, Scott Moody, for his service and the report from the commission. We appreciate the entire commission for the work that they do. I'm joined by Emily Stebbins-Willock, our CFO. I also would be remiss if I didn't highlight, to Councilor Grant's point, that we now have short video content up on Reels and Instagram, and we even have a TikTok account. And our pole-mounted chargers were the subject of our first video and got quite a bit of reaction. So Councilor Grant
and
was
I
on to
saw
something.
it, and I brought a smile to my face.
Thank you. She was on to something, and we're glad for the suggestion. We'll keep doing more of that. So I'm going to start off with presenting on the rate case. We've presented at the Board of Finance previously and during budget presentations, but I think if it's helpful, we'll just run through the slides related to the rate case, and then we'll go on to present on the line of credit and miscellaneous fees. We're just loading up the slides right now for the rate case. We are seeking, as I think everyone knows, a 5.5% rate change in FY25. We have a 5.5% that happened in FY24. Previously, we had a 3.95%, and then at the very beginning of the pandemic, we had a 7.5%. So that's what this first slide is indicating. History of rate changes. What I would call the council's attention to is there was a period of time where we had no rate changes and then very high rate changes, double digit, 32%, 22%. This is back, decades ago. Our goal is not to ever be in that position, not to ever shock ratepayers with a 22% or a 32%. We've seen in other states where they are more exposed to the fossil fuel marketplace that when there were spikes in fossil fuel prices, we saw double and even triple digit rate changes in places like New Hampshire, for example. Not well known, but New England's one of the most expensive regions in the country for electricity. Vermont is now the cheapest in terms of rates out of all the New England states.
Previously, Maine had been the cheapest, but Vermont is now the cheapest. And within Vermont, BED is very competitive, as we'll talk about in a moment. So important to note the drivers of the rate case and of rate change, and really this is a lot forward-looking as opposed to backward-looking in this case. Sales to customers have been flat. They dipped significantly during the pandemic. They're rebounding a bit. We do still have certain sites that are offline that are bigger energy users in the city that when they come back online will also drive sales forward. In the REC markets, the renewable energy markets for credits, we've had relatively flat revenues. There was a period of time back in 2016, 2017, that time frame, where renewable energy credit revenues could be around 13 million annually, and right now they're closer to 7.5 to 8 million annually. We have, in terms of purchase power costs, and I think Chair Moody alluded to this, we've seen fluctuations in the value of what is essentially our excess renewable energy that we can sell into the market because we're more than 100% renewable. We're long on renewable power. So when prices are high, we benefit from that. When prices are lower, we bring in a little less revenue due to that. Transmission is a huge driver in the region. It's not a controllable cost. It's something that we pay to be connected to the grid and that every utility pays to be connected to the grid. In New England, it's been going up, and it is a significant driver for us and really for every utility. And then inflation in the electric space, the price change and the rate pressure, as we'll point out on another slide, it's actually exceeded inflation. So electricity is an area where even as inflation overall has come down a bit, electricity prices really haven't fully benefited from that, as we'll see in a moment. We can go to the next slide. So one of the things that we've done is every single year, and FY25 is going to be no exception, we've asked for less than what we could appropriately justify in the regulatory process at the Public Utility Commission. We want to be as conscious as we can be about affordability for our ratepayers. And so as you can see, there have been cases where we've asked for half as much as what we could have justified under our financial metrics at the PUC. And we're trending towards, or our goal is to trend towards having lower single-digit rate changes as opposed to mid or certainly upper single-digit rate changes. So that's a goal as we go forward into FY26 and beyond. This just, as I mentioned, you can see over the last 3 years, electricity prices nationally averaging 7.7% as opposed to inflation, which is now on an annual basis is closer to around 2.7 or certainly under 3%. So there's been some stickiness in the inflationary effects on electricity, and certainly that impacts us. We see that in the supply chain. If you go to order new transformers, it takes a long time to get them. The prices have gone up, for example. And then this is just a comparison between BED's rates, which are at the very bottom of this chart, and other items, inflation, cost of housing, cost of medical care, cost of education. So we're conscious that although we are seeing rate changes now after a period of 12 years without having them, we're trying to keep those costs below the overall rate of inflation and certainly below what we're seeing in other sectors of the economy. I mentioned our competitiveness in terms of residential rates. We have some of the best residential rates, not only in Vermont, but in New England. You can see even after the proposed rate change, we're well below what other Vermont utilities on average have for residential rates and well below the New England average. And the purple line there is the Energy Assistance Program customers, which those customers are getting a 12.5% discount. Commissioner Chair Moody mentioned that as well. And we did receive approval, relatively late breaking, for the changes that we had proposed that the council had approved at the PUC to make changes to that program to help enroll many more customers. So we're hopeful that we can quadruple enrollment in that program in the coming year and get more customers the benefit of that discount. In terms of commercial industrial rates, I want to point out this is not a completely apples to apples chart in that when you say commercial and industrial, you're really grouping together everything from small businesses to large manufacturers. We don't tend to have a lot of large manufacturing type customers in Burlington, and industrial customers get lower rates, generally speaking. So while it looks like we're kind of in and out of the average for Vermont and still below what the average would be in New England, our commercial rates are actually fairly competitive. We really don't have a whole lot of customers that would qualify as what we would think of as industrial the way that some other states do, certainly in Burlington. And then the total rate, we remain below both the New England and the Vermont average, even again with the proposed change for FY25. In terms of bills for residential customers, the average increase would be $4.51. For the small general category, which is roughly 2/3 of our business customers, the change would be $5.71. And again, these are changes that would be implemented starting with bills rendered in September. Because we file with the PUC, there's a period of time where we wait until the rate change takes effect as a surcharge on bills while the PUC reviews the rate case and ultimately determines whether to approve the rate change or not, at which point it then becomes part of the underlying rate as a whole. And just lastly, you can see because the Energy Assistance Program is a percentage discount, not a flat discount, as the rates change, the value of that credit also changes and becomes larger. So that will continue to track over time. And again, we're hoping to quadruple at a minimum the enrollment in that program over the next year. I think that is everything on the rate change. Shall we continue or pause for questions?
Why don't you continue?
Okay. We're going to go next to line of credit. Okay.
Okay, so, thanks. So we don't have slides or a presentation on the line of credit. We can just speak to that briefly and answer any questions. BED has maintained a line of credit for some years now. It was last set at the $5 million level in 2007. As you know, we received approval from the voters on town meeting day to raise that limit from $5 million to $10 million, primarily just to reflect the fact that our operating budget has grown since the $5 million level was set, and to sort of keep the access to working capital at a level that's commensurate with our daily, cash outflows. We have not used the line since 2009 in the wake of the financial crisis. We don't plan to use the line again. The purpose of the line is twofold. One, to provide access to that emergency cash if we ever needed it again. And then second, it bolsters our Moody's credit rating. It doesn't count directly towards days cash on hand, but it is referenced in our credit opinion, and it is a qualitatively positive thing that we have the line of credit. So in some respects, the resolution before you is fairly routine. The city charter establishes a provision for BED to have this line of credit. It is a 2-year limit on what the charter allows. So every 2 years, we come to the council to ask for authority for the chief administrative officer and others to execute the loan documents. That's what we're here to do tonight. The two changes from prior years are, one, the new limit is now $10 million. The governor did sign the charter change into law late last week. And then the second change is that we will be switching banks. We issued an RFP in April, received some responses. We have selected M&T Bank as our partner for the line renewal this time round. And then you have the resolution before you that contains authorizing language.
Thank you. And can we continue to item 3?
Okay, miscellaneous fees.
I'll use the moment while we're loading the slides just to provide some additional context from the commission report item that we are working on a retrospective that we hope to be able to issue sometime later this year that will look at some of the drivers of change relative to the net zero energy data. So I wanted to be responsive to Councilor Kane and the question there. So we are going to dig in more on that, and we certainly are excited to be able to present that later in the year to the council and the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The right window. Okay, so miscellaneous service fees. Burlington Electric provides service under tariffs. Most of our tariffs are things that are familiar, like the residential service rate, the small commercial customer rate. We also have a tariff for miscellaneous fees, miscellaneous services. And these are really one-off services requested by an individual customer. The most common of these is what was called the initial service fee, where someone's moving out or buying a new home, moving into a new apartment. They need to establish service as a new customer, or we need to switch service from one customer to another. Also, we charge for things like bad checks, for reconnections, for sending a crew out to your house at 2 in the morning because you think there's something wrong with your power and you want us to check it out. And the reason we charge on a one-off basis is kind of following the principle of cost causer pays. So because these are things that are requested by an individual customer, it's not fair to sort of spread them across every customer in the city. So we charge on a per occurrence basis. Our current fees, as Chair Moody mentioned, were last updated almost 15 years ago based on FY 2009 costs. And in FY 2009, at that time, we had not deployed advanced metering infrastructure yet. AMI lets us do things like remote meter reads, remote disconnects, remote reconnects. We didn't have that capability before. We had to roll a truck for every single meter read. These fees are approved by the PUC, and we have to submit sort of a cost basis for them. So the amounts charged are not a sense of value or kind of what we think the going rate is, so to speak. It's really derived from the number of minutes it takes for kind of each type of personnel involved to perform the service. And so the Electric Commission asked us to take a look at these fees. They received some public comment that they were out of date, and we agreed. So we looked at all our business processes. We updated all the labor and time involved, as I said. Changes to the IBW contract were incorporated. We calculated a carrying charge to sort of account for the costs that we bear to maintain the AMI infrastructure that allows for some streamlining of service delivery. And we previewed these changes with the Vermont Department of Public Service. There's a long table in your packet of all the individual fees with the current wording and the new wording and the current fee and the proposed fee. Some fees are decreasing. Those would be initial service, which is by far the most volume that we do, meter removal and replacement, and reconnection after hours. Some fees will increase under this proposal: the reconnection fee, the returned check fee, the temporary service fee, and what's now called customer assistance fee, but is more accurately, we think, described as power problem investigation that turns out to be on the customer side of the infrastructure. We are proposing to eliminate the fee for collection, which is currently charged when a BED person goes to the home and there's an unpaid bill and the person pays you in person, which I don't think we even do very much of anymore, but we certainly don't want to charge people for that anymore. And then we are proposing new fees for when we send crews out to do, to assist an electrician or a contractor with a disconnect or reconnect of service related to some work being done at the property. The Electric Commission, as Chair Moody said, took up this topic quite a bit this winter and early spring, that we discussed in proposals at 3 different meetings. We did put information out about the proposed fees to a number of media and asked for customer feedback. We heard from 21 people. And in response to that feedback, overwhelmingly, it was about that customer assistance fee, which sounds like we're going to charge you if you call and ask for help, which was, it really pointed out how terrible the description was. So we've
updated the wording around that in response to the customer feedback. And the commission voted unanimously to recommend the changes at their March meeting. Revenue impact to BED is estimated overall to be largely neutral. The initial service fee is decreasing. As I said, that's the one we have the most volume in. So that's going to decrease revenue on an annual basis by about $120,000, we think. However, we are also doing a lot of disconnection, reconnection work, which we're not charging for at all. And instituting new fees for that, we think will increase revenue by about $130,000 a year. So maybe not net zero, maybe slight revenue increase, of around $10,000 a year for the proposal as a whole. Next steps, if the council approves the proposal, we would file a request to update the tariff with the Vermont Public Utility Commission. The commission would open a docket. The Department of Public Service could choose to investigate, and there would be the normal public process and public opportunity for comment and engagement with the PUC docket. And then the new fees, unlike our across-the-board rate increases, the new fees would not go into effect unless and until the revised tariff is approved by the PUC. And then I am happy to walk through or answer questions about the details of these, but I just by exception that I know the table is small, but this does show in detail all of the changes being proposed.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation on those 3 items. To ensure we're able to stick to our agenda timing and to provide as many counselors as possible an opportunity to comment on the item, pursuant to Rule 6B of our council rules, I will be adjusting our 5-minute limit to 4 minutes on this item. And with that, we'll turn to the council to see if anyone has any comments or questions. Start with Councillor Kane, then Councillor Newbeezer, then Councillor Litwin, then Councillor McKnight.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering how equity was considered with the fee adjustments. One example that comes to mind is the return check fee went up from $10 to $28, and I imagine that is a fee that might hit like lower income people more often. So I'm just wondering how equity was considered.
Yeah, we, as I said before, the fees reflect our cost basis. So if the customer presenting the returns check doesn't pay the fee, then those costs are borne by BED, which then get paid by all of the other ratepayers. So that would be the effect. You will notice that our proposal contains actually 2 bad check fees. We are waiting to hear from our bank about whether or not there's a state law in Vermont that says if you write a bad check, you may be charged by the bank, but if you try to cash a bad check, you may not be charged by the bank. And our bank, TD, their legal team is investigating whether or not, as a federally chartered bank, this state law applies to them. For now, they are not charging us the bad check fee that they used to be charging us anymore. And so if their lawyers find that they should not be charging us that fee, then we certainly wouldn't, because now we would be not passing that on to customers. So, yeah.
Okay, so strictly using the cost basis for fees means that any equity efforts are going to be on the rate side, which there are existing programs on the rate side, just to be clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Councillor Newbeezer?
Thank you so much for the presentation, and I guess just quick comments, because we kind of got an overview and then obviously have discussion around rate changes and miscellaneous fees. I'll just say generally, which I know I've raised before when you all graciously had me at BED over on Pine Street, I am concerned about sort of the long-term sustainability of the rec market and the effect that that's going to have over time, and I know that's easy to say and a hard problem to tackle. So I look forward to hopefully working together in that area. And I think same thing with McNeil. There's obviously been and will continue to be economic benefits from it running, and there's the base load question, which is very fair. And I think it is something that we need to take a hard look at as a city, because we can't continue with the amount of emissions that it's spewing given the climate crisis. So more of a comment from me. The other piece is, I wonder if you just describe, because the thing that, so those are my long-term concerns. The things that were exciting to me, particularly around, I wonder if you could just dive in a little more on the ratepayer assistance program, and in particular just give a better sense of sort of what socioeconomic groups are being impacted and how, if that makes sense, give a better estimate of, yeah, I think it's amazing work, and particularly around like sort of the auto opt-in as well. I wonder if you could describe that more for the public.
Maybe if we can pull that slide, I don't know if we can, back up in a moment. I do just want to briefly mention that I can't agree necessarily with the idea that McNeil is spewing carbon emissions. We really want to look at any power resource, solar, wind, hydro, McNeil, anything, on a life cycle basis. And so we really have to look at all the inputs and really balance all of those. And I want everyone on the council, everyone in the public to know we take climate change incredibly seriously. This is one of the utilities in the country that is doing the most work on climate and trying as hard as we can to help our community reach IPCC targets and reach even more ambitious net zero energy targets. And if our view was that it was simply a carbon spewing resource, we'd be looking for a replacement with great urgency. And as it is, we know there are a number of studies, as we've talked about in FY25, that are going to examine these exact questions and give us guidance both internally and external with third parties on how we can reduce the environmental footprint at McNeil while still getting some of those benefits. So I just wanted to offer that perspective. On the energy assistance program, so we have, as of kind of the date of this slide, the 238 customers enrolled. We're hoping that with the auto enrollment for any customer that we know is eligible, that we can get to between 800 and 1,500 customers enrolled. So as of the date of this slide, we said pilot program still in effect, but as mentioned, the PUC approval is in. We do use the 185% of federal poverty level metric. You can be and we don't verify that independently at BED. We really rely on eligibility in other programs, both to reduce the administrative burden on our end, but also for the customer as well. So if somebody's in the fuel assistance program, if they have a Section 8 housing voucher, 3 Squares, any of those types of programs where we know they're eligible, we basically want to auto-enroll them if we have that information, or that if they are not auto-enrolled, they can provide that information to us and we'll get them enrolled. They don't have to come to us and present tax returns or anything like that. So really the goal is to make, this is where equity comes in, to Councilor Kane's point earlier, to make it possible for customers who are income qualified to pay less on their electric bill. It's a relatively new development. It's really just in the last few years that we've had the pilot and now the permanent program. And the state of Vermont's examining this. There's a PUC docket as well, looking more broadly, because I believe it's only us, Vermont Gas, Green Mountain Power, that currently have a rate like this. And their programs differ, but their underlying economics also differ. So I think there's a goal of having every utility in the state offer this type of program, and there's going to be a review of, do we need to harmonize those, or should they be different on a different basis for different utilities? So there's a lot of good work happening in the space. I'd also be remiss if I didn't recognize Ita Menos here, our project and equity analyst at Burlington Electric, who's done fantastic work and outreach in the community, meeting folks and letting them know about this program, and making, to Councilor Grant's point earlier, helping us with video content, otherwise language translation, to make sure we're reaching as many customers as we can.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Litwin and then Councilor McKnight.
Thanks a lot. And I appreciate the overview, and my questions will bounce around a little bit because you went through so much. So this is where I probably overlap with Councilor Kane, and I have questions about the return check fee. On that line, you say $28 if BED is charged a bank fee, $18 if we are not charged a bank fee. I just spent 3 years on the Housing Board of Review, and that is not really a standard that we would use on the Housing Board, and there are actually some rules around why you couldn't do that. And so I like to deal in actual damages. And so if there's not actual damages here, I guess my question to you is, why would we be charging somebody an $18 fee if we do not actually have a damage to reclaim?
So the $18 really is the labor, like the time of our customer care reps and our finance team in sort of, processing or not processing that payment and communicating with the customer that the check bounced and sort of managing that, really. So that $18 doesn't include.
I can appreciate that. I just wouldn't, I don't support it. So I'll just put that out there. I would like to see us change the policy. If we're talking about equity and we're talking about folks, who are the people that are going to be in the crosshairs of something like that? We're talking about low-income families, maybe folks who are living paycheck to paycheck and the check doesn't clear and whatever, elderly folks who make a mistake. So I would really ask you to look at that. Additionally, I did want to ask, the reconnection fee would increase from $20 to $26. And again, this is about the nexus of folks who are experiencing those disconnections. And so I'm wondering if folks are enrolled in support, is that fee waived for them? Folks who just missed a bill or struggled, it's those same folks that I'm imagining, so.
I can comment on the reconnection fee. If you notice, the current language allows us to charge that fee only to customers who have been disconnected after they didn't pay their bill. So we are proposing that we remove that who has been disconnected for non-payment, right? And simply charge it when we have to reconnect a person who's been disconnected for any reason, potentially at their request, because they needed the power off for a while or something. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. You were, so often the reconnection fee and the initial service fee go hand in hand. So an apartment's being turned over, the last tenant moved out, the landlord didn't have a standing order to keep the power on but transfer to their name. So the power is off. A week later, a new tenant moves in. We have to reconnect. And it's initial service because it's a new person, new customer being set up. Right now, we would charge both of those fees, and now we're saying, no, we will not. We will only charge the reconnect. We will not charge the initial service.
Okay. Also about the EAP program, you said you used the 185% of federal poverty level. I have that pulled up on your website, and so for all of us, a single person household, the max income is about $27,800. For two people, it's about $37,800. I wonder, is there anything precluding us from exploring expanding who's able to access that? I know that Champlain Housing Trust, which has been brought up multiple times tonight, has been able to increase that quite substantially to be able to provide housing for folks who would otherwise be left behind because they make too much money. But as we know in Chittenden County, and in Burlington in particular, it doesn't get you very far, so with our rents as they are. So I was just wondering if there's any effort that could be made to expand who's accessible, why we use that standard, can we use a different standard, can we learn from CHT?
And I just wanted to respond briefly to the prior point too. It's not that we don't agree with you that there might be, or any of you who've expressed concern about, equity within the fees. The real challenge is utility regulatory practice requires, and the PUC requires, that if we are charging something in rates, that it's a sort of broadly applicable
service for all customers, and if somebody is it cost causer pays principle. If somebody is causing the cost individually, that the fee really is covering that. So we certainly tried within that structure to be, as fair-minded as we could, but we have an obligation as a utility regulated in the state of Vermont to have fees that reflect the cost of service. Otherwise, you get into what's referred to as cross-subsidization, which is looked on fairly unfavorably within utility rate context. But I just wanted to offer that I understand what you're saying.
Is it your suggestion then
Councilor
that...
Litwin, I'm sorry, you're at time.
Am I already? Okay, well then, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Did you have anything further?
Just a brief point on the federal poverty, 185%. We tried to use that because it was a city metric that's been used for other programs like CEDO, for example. So we really tried to create some consistency across city programs. There's nothing preventing us or other entities within the city from re-examining that. We would have to update our tariff at that point. And the only kind of impact I would call to mind is that if the program costs were going to increase substantially, that is recovered from all ratepayers. So we just are conscious of that, but there's nothing that says we can't change that metric in the future if we find that that's not an effective metric and we need to look at a different metric.
Thank you. Councilor McKnight?
Thank you. Thank you to both of you for being here and for all the hard work that went into this and all of the detail. Really appreciate it. As a communications professional, I also really appreciate the attention to the wording and clarity of communications around these fees. Those little things actually are really important, as well as appreciation for your effort to ensure that the rate increases are modest here. I have a few questions that I'll get through and then kind of hand it back to you both. But just anytime rates are going up, it seems sort of a germane time to ask that, other than, as you mentioned, enrolling in EAP, what are some of the best ways that you see residents succeed at reducing their electric use or maybe their overall utility costs by either using less electricity, converting gas to electric, or all of the paths to get there in order to save money with the rate increase coming down. And I would just make a general suggestion that, and a question about your plans for this. Anytime we have a rate increase like this, I think it's best practice to really plan strategic communication to the public alongside that perhaps shares some of those efforts that individuals can take to reduce their bills. Do we have such a plan in place? Do we have an adequate budget to fund that plan? A lot of times I hear communication suggestions shared, and we can say, let's post more of all of this online, but it takes bodies sitting in front of computers and video cameras, and it's very expensive to do that well and to do it strategically. So just curious to hear your response to that. Thank you.
No, absolutely appreciate that. Yeah, good news is we have really strong programs both for energy efficiency and for electrification. I think in this FY25 budget that goes along with this rate case, we have over $3 million dedicated to supporting incentives for customers, both residential and commercial, for everything from energy efficiency services all the way through electrification, switching to an electric vehicle, a heat pump, going from a gas mower to an electric mower. With efficiency, we know we can do cost-effective things to help customers. So I would encourage any residential customer who is interested to contact us. They can email us at energyservices@burlingtonelectric.com. We do have also Mike Canerick here, who runs a number of communication programs with us. And typically when we have done rate changes, we do update our materials, our website, Front Porch Forum, North Avenue News, all the communications channels that we have to encourage everyone who's interested to take advantage of those rebates and energy efficiency programs. So yes, there are definitely steps that people can take to mitigate the cost increase, whether it's switching to more efficient lighting, updating appliances, doing weatherization work, having an energy audit. Some of these steps can be really low cost and can save substantially. So we encourage customers to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. So just to summarize, if somebody wants to look into that, it sounds like the best ways to do it are head to the BED website or give your office a call or send an email.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Or find us at a community event. We'll be in a number of places over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Any other councilor wish to speak to any of these items? Seeing no one in the queue, if there is no objection, then I would turn to Counselor for a three-part motion on the three items here. And Counselor Barlow, if I could turn to you for a motion on the first part.
Sure. With regard to the rate change, I move to approve and authorize that the general manager of the Burlington Electric Department or their designee to file tariff amendments and supporting documents with the Vermont Public Utility Commission requesting an increase to Burlington Electric Department rates of 5.5% on bills rendered on or after September 1st, 2024 as proposed. With regard to the line of credit increase, I move to waive the reading and adopt the resolution. And with regard to the proposed changes on miscellaneous fees, I move to approve and authorize the general manager of the Burlington Electric Department or their designee to file tariff amendments and supporting documents with the Vermont Public Utility Commission requesting changes in Burlington Electric Department's miscellaneous service fees as proposed.
Thank you, Counselor Barlow. Is there a second to that three-part motion? Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Carpenter. Is there any further discussion on the motion? We will go to a vote then. This is on a three-part motion as put forward by Counselor Barlow. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for the presentation tonight. That takes us to item 6.5, which is a resolution review and update to rental weatherization standards. This is sponsored by Counselor Barlow. Counselor Barlow, if I could turn to you again for a motion on item 6.5, and then would be happy to give you the floor upon a second.
Yes, I move to waive the reading and adopt the resolution and do ask for the floor back after a second.
Thank you, Counselor Barlow. Is there a second? Thank you, Counselor Broderick. Counselor Barlow, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. On January 17th, 2022, the council approved a rental weatherization ordinance that established a compliance schedule for rental buildings using more than 50,000 BTUs per square foot per year. There's been a staged implementation starting with higher energy users first, and on January 1st, 2025, all buildings falling under this ordinance will be required to be compliant. The work is moving slowly according to the Department of Permitting and Inspections. Few properties have done the work, and many are in a waiting line, waiting for energy audits, waiting to schedule or reschedule work, or waiting for scheduled work to begin. Through mid-April, 342 properties were required to comply with the ordinance, and DPI estimated that many had not completed the work, but had documented that they were somewhere in the waiting line, waiting for the work to be done, which is one way to be compliant. The waiting line is believed to be mainly a symptom of the number of workers in the audit and weatherization field, but there may be other reasons as well. And this resolution simply creates a process by which TUC can review our current progress and make recommendations on what might be done to improve our progress on these rental weatherization goals. The resolution also allows TUC to create an advisory group of content experts who, along with relevant city departments, can help us make recommendations to improve this progress. And I will also add that I believe Director Ward said he would be available on Zoom to answer questions.
I will note that Director Ward is online if there are any questions that folks have for Director Ward. So thank you very much, Councilor Barlow. I will turn to the council to see if anyone has any questions or comments with respect to this resolution. Councilor Newbeeser.
Yeah, I just want to thank you. This is rental weatherization is actually one of the first issues I worked on after former Councilor Hanson was first elected to this council. We worked together with a number of other folks in the community to write this resolution and get it passed. And it has been concerning that it's been so difficult to implement. That was, I think, this rental weatherization as a topic taught me how important not only having the votes on the council to get things done, how important that is, but also to actually follow up and really focus in on the implementation piece. So I welcome this resolution. I'm going to be happy to support it. The one note which I communicated to you, Councilor Barlow, before this meeting is I am concerned that, at least in my view, and I think we've heard this from relevant stakeholders, and I think we've heard this from relevant city department heads at our first meeting as a council, sort of workforce development and having enough workers do the weatherization work is, to my mind, the biggest piece here. Because like you said, there's such a backlog. I think it was only like, don't quote me on it, but I think it was like 6 properties actually completed. And then we actually had decent numbers, actually completed the weatherization work. We had decent numbers of folks taking adequate or sort of like reasonable steps on their end as property owners to get in compliance. But there's just nobody to do the work, right? And so there's only so much you can do. So to my mind, I hope that, I know there's a deadline of October, I think, in this resolution, that this moves through to really quickly. I think CEDO in particular has a long track record of incredibly effective work around workforce development. And so that's going to be my focus moving forward, and I look forward to working with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Does any other councilor have a question or comment with respect to this? Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. I also am in support of this resolution. I'm very excited to take a look at the rental weatherization ordinance and see what we can do to improve it, especially in regards to workforce development. This is an ordinance that, from the beginning of my campaign for City Council, I've been thinking about on how we can improve it, how our rentals, they're not getting weatherized fast enough, and there's so much how our city can benefit with lower emissions, lower electricity bills, and tenants actually being warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So I'm very excited to work on the TUC with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Any other councilor wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. The motion is to waive the reading and adopt the resolution. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Councilor Barlow, and thank you, Director Ward, as well. I see you online and appreciate your work and ongoing collaboration on this effort. The last item then on our deliberative agenda is item 6.6. It's a proposed ordinance amendment on Chapter 18, Housing Article 5, Regulation of Conversion of Rental Housing to Condominiums or Cooperatives. The recommended action here is, why don't I turn to the sponsor of the resolution, Councilor Shannon, to read the recommended action here, and then would be happy to provide you the floor back upon a second.
Thank you, President Travers. This is just a first reading, and I move to waive the reading, refer to Ordinance Committee, and ask for the floor back briefly after a second.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Councilor Litwin. Councilor Shannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We have discussed for a while the opportunity that we have to wind back the regulations that we have that discourage the creation of condominiums. And they were created at a time when our environment in creating condominiums was quite different than they are today. Today, we can't get builders to build condominiums because they can't finance them. I think that is worth considering, and we have very few affordable home ownership opportunities in this city. The few that we have are condominium projects. We've had some discussions with city staff for a while, but city staff is very busy, and I think probably goes to the many other things that are on their plate. So I wanted to just move this forward, move it to the Ordinance Committee so that we could continue these discussions, including things like how to, is there a way that we can help tenants to buy the unit that they're in and stabilize their housing costs and start building equity rather than always be chasing increasing rents. So I hope that we have the opportunity to work on this further in the ordinance committee, and I'm certainly open to the suggestions of this board as to how we can improve it. This isn't meant as an ending point, but as a starting point. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shannon. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Newbeezer.
I feel like I'm talking too much.
No.
A couple points. Yeah, I am really interested to see where this goes and appreciate that this is, in fact, a starting point. I think I have two concerns, and I might be misunderstanding the resolution as well, so if I'm inaccurate, please correct me. I think there's my concern with sort of the deregulation as you described it, Councillor Shannon, is I agree with the end goal and what you described. I also want to encourage home ownership, and I think that's a noble goal that we should be pursuing. So I'm glad that there's agreement there and that folks are focused on that. I am concerned with eliminating any sort of revenue streams to the Housing Trust Fund, which I think some of these fees go into, if I read correctly, and I might be wrong there, because I'm still learning and certainly not an expert. But I don't, if I did read it correctly, I don't want to get into a position where in order to build more housing, we're sort of cutting off sustainable funding streams to the Housing Trust Fund. So I'm concerned on that front. The other piece I would just say, and I guess part of my confusion and trying to understand this is that we just, from a process perspective, I don't know about other councilors, but this appearing on the agenda is the first time I'm seeing this resolution and didn't receive any sort of communication other than this being posted on the agenda, which I don't think is helpful for me to give productive feedback, have conversations, come to consensus on the council, figure out good policy solutions. And I can appreciate perhaps this conversation predates my time on the council. But I do think it's important that we don't get into a habit of not sending around resolutions before they come to the council floor. And so maybe I missed an email. I don't think that's the case. And so that's, I guess, my only feedback. And I know that there's plenty of work ahead and this isn't the final product. So I can appreciate that as well. Thank you.
May I respond?
Councillor Newbeezer. Yes, I think there were questions directed to you, Councillor Shannon. So happy for you to respond, and then we'll go to Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. On your first point, we did talk about that with Director Pine, and because these fees are so onerous, and not only the fees but the conditions are so onerous, it very rarely happens. And so I'd be happy to get the data from Director Pine as to what has actually gone into the trust fund, but it's very little because it's so rare. We've really made it nearly impossible to do these type of conversions. On the second point, I've been here 20 years, so I think I'm pretty well versed in council custom, and sometimes resolutions and ordinances get circulated in advance and sometimes they don't. I appreciate that you would like to have more participation in that process, and I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shannon. Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. I also have some concern over in this first draft, obviously, the nixing of the condominium conversion fee. I also talked to Director Pine about this, and it is a relatively small number because of how restrictive this ordinance is for creating condos and cooperatives, which I'm definitely in support of. I still feel like if there's other things that the ordinance committee can do to incentivize or just allow for the more condos and more cooperative housing, I think having some type of fee in place to our housing trust fund or another stream
to allow us to build affordable housing, it just helps solve another facet of our our housing crisis, sorry, in terms of we need to increase community ownership of housing and ownership of housing in general. We also need more housing. And if I'm correct, the wording of the purpose of that condo conversion fees to provide funds to replace low and moderate income housing lost through conversion of rental housing to condominiums and cooperatives. I think that's still a very good purpose and a good avenue for revenue if we can make it easier to create condos and cooperatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Does any other councilor wish to comment on this matter? We'll go to Councilor Carpenter first, and then we'll go to you, Councilor Newbeezer.
As the counselor really old enough, I actually worked on this in 1987, spent a lot of time on it, and spent a lot of time in the state provisions as well. And it was really, really needed at the time. I think it's just appropriate that we need to look at it and see if it is an impediment. In terms of the fee, we need to look at that. Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? If we charge a 5% fee here, does that make the unit go up 5% if you're going to buy it? That's equivalent to down payment assistance. Maybe we funnel the fee into the down payment assistance to get the home. So I think that's all just the mix that we need to do. And I think, as you mentioned, just broaden the incentives. One thing I would also like to do, which really isn't touched at all by this, and I'm not clear how much of an impediment it is, but is there a way, as we try to build new units in the building in the city, to kind of go into it head-on, understanding that this might be a project that will be condominiumized in the future? The difficulty of getting financing in the secondary market for developing condos is problematic. You have to do all this pre-sale. They have to be occupied. And if you can't occupy them out the gate as a home ownership unit, either they don't get built as that or they remain rental. So I just encourage us to broaden our thinking a little bit. So there are actually provisions even under the low-income housing tax credits where you can kind of do that in the future. So I hope in this same process we look at that as well.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Newbeezer.
Yeah, because I think it's an important precedent, I do want to touch on the process piece again. I don't think it's my personal preference as a counselor, and certainly I'm deferential to folks with more institutional knowledge and experience. What I'll say is that after 2 months of having conversations as electeds, we've all said that collaboration is a keystone, and in order to collaborate, conversations before resolutions come to the floor is important. And I will just say that first resolution I ever introduced, we had a vote on postponing because we wanted to get to consensus and collaborate more, even though I was more than generous in my timeline. In Councilor Broderick's piece, there was a criticism last meeting about, well, you haven't done your stakeholder outreach, basically was the criticism. I don't think there was merit there.
Point of order.
I'm not sure that this conversation is germane to the resolution. This is a process issue. It could be talked about elsewhere.
Is germane to the resolution.
All right. Well, the point of order is well taken. Councilor Newbeezer, or you still have a
I'll wrap up. I'm just saying, I in good faith want to work on resolutions, build consensus. I've been consistent in that. I'll continue to be consistent in that, and I think it's an important principle worth noting, and not one to, it's one that we need to keep reiterating because people, regardless of political stripe, want that out of our city leadership right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Any other councilor wish to speak to this matter? Councilor Grant?
Just wanted to say that I agree with Councilor Broderick's concerns. I also agree with what was just said about process that I believe applies to this and any future resolutions. We are not being consistent, and we need to be. We are still living this politics over people and not the other way around, and I really would like us to think about that. Thank you.
Okay. I will say the recommended action here is simply to refer the matter to committee. I welcome councilors continuing to bring matters forward and it then moving through the committee process, and we'll just note as a point of information that some of the other resolutions referenced in comments by councilors here, the action presented to the council was for the council to take final action and not to simply refer the matter to committee.
Point of information.
Yep.
Councilor Broderick's resolution was to refer to committee.
Well, no, to clarify the record, the resolution was for it to be passed, for the mayor to then sign it, to then direct the two committee at that point to draft a particular ordinance. This is a draft ordinance that is being referred to the committee, which will then come back to the full council if the ordinance committee chooses to send it back for a final decision. Councilor Shannon, Councilor Kane hasn't been heard yet, so I'm going to go to Councilor Kane, and then we'll give you the last word, and then we'll go to a vote.
Thank you. Since we are talking about process, I do have some confusion here. So it looks like this is sponsored by 2 of the 3 members of the ordinance committee, and it just seems like ordinance committee work. And so I'm wondering, was the 3rd member of the ordinance committee included in conversations about what we're looking at tonight?
Once a resolution is posted, any councilor may choose to sponsor it. 3 councilors, myself included, have chosen to sponsor it, and I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
I guess I just thought that work by a committee is
There
not
has been no work by a committee. The motion before us is to send the matter to committee. The question is not germane to the debate. We're going to turn to Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. I'm not going to answer more questions about council process from people who have been here for 2 months. I have a long history here. I'm not intending to answer these questions. I started this discussion by saying I welcome your input. This is an ordinance. It's not a resolution. The action tonight does not actually do anything but refer this to committee for more process. An ordinance is required to go to committee. So this is only a first reading. They're often put on a consent agenda with no discussion, and there is opportunity for you all to weigh in with your opinions, not your opinions about the process, your opinions about what we're actually trying to accomplish tonight. So I welcome your collaboration. I welcome your thoughts. I recognize the input that you had here. I value it. We will consider all of those things when it goes to the ordinance committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. We will call the vote. The motion is to waive the first reading and refer to the ordinance committee. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
I believe that the vote is 10 ayes, 1 no. If any councilor disagrees with that count, please let me know. So by a vote of 10 to 1, the motion carries. That is the end of our, and I will just note for the record that Councilor Grant is the no vote on that. That brings us to the end of our deliberative agenda. Item 7 then is committee reports. Is there any councilor that has a committee report? Start with Councilor Barlow.
The TUC will be having a virtual meeting at an abnormal time on June 11th. We'll be having a meeting at 5:30 virtually, but it'll be posted for everybody to attend. And the sole purpose of this meeting is to review ordinance changes for taxis that the Vehicle for Hire Licensing Board has suggested. So those are highly anticipated, and we'll be looking forward to that meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Anyone on this side of the table with a committee report? Anyone over here? Councilor Grant and then Councilor Newbeezer.
The REIB committee will actually not be meeting for June because the team will be working hard on the final details for the Juneteenth event, which falls on, the actual Juneteenth is during the week, but the event will be Saturday on the 15th, and the Embrace and Belonging monument reveal will also be earlier in the week, I believe the 14th. I need to verify that date.
It is the 14th.
Thank you so much for that, Councilor Littman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Newbeezer?
CDNR's meeting, I'm going to blank on it. It's on the city calendar, but one of the things we've been discussing that all wards is sending representatives to come participate in the development of a resolution we sent over to CDNR a little while ago in regards to the relationship of MPAs to the council. And so excited for that. So definitely come to the next CDNR meeting if you have interest in working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer.
And it's 6 p.m. on the 11th.
6 p.m. on the 11th. Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, Councilor Kane. Any other councilor with a committee report? Seeing none, we will move to item 8, which is City Council General Affairs. Is there any councilor that wishes to speak to General Affairs? Seeing none, we will move to item number 9, which is City Council President, Council updates. I do not have an update, so we then move to item 10, the last item on our agenda, which is you, Mayor, General Affairs.
Thank you, Councilor President Travers. So in line with how I usually have tried to organize these updates, I want to start first with a few general updates from my office, and then move a little bit into community engagement, state and regional relations. So as folks have been following along, and I appreciate councilors who've been able to make it to the budget information meetings, we've been covering every department through the marvelous Nights of May, which I don't love that name, but we'll just go with it for now. We completed the budget presentations for fiscal year 25 last Wednesday, and during that last final meeting, I included a memo from my office to recommend several different strategic community investments, community safety investments that will make some real change in this community. And within that memo, which is posted on the city website, would include $250,000 to continue the CRT community response team work through the fire department, and an additional $325,000 to do things such as investing in library security, using a social worker, and increase private security, which they already have. An additional proposal going forward around camping, which I'll come back to since there was such interest in that earlier on this evening. And also a special assistant in my office, because if there's one thing I've noticed in 2 months, which was yesterday, 2 months on this job, which I don't think actually disqualifies people from offering input into the process. But within those 2 months, we have a very siloed response to community safety. And if there's one thing that I think the city really would benefit from, is the expertise of someone doing a deep analysis on how we deliver community safety, where do we best do efficiencies and investments in our citywide response, and frankly, how we do things more effectively and efficiently, and that would be the use of this senior assistant in my office. So those savings came from the diligent work of department heads and my staff to find savings, not only close the $13.1 million gap, but find additional resources and able to advance those investments. And so now working on that, tonight we did a final presentation to the Board of Finance on the fiscal year 25 budget, and we'll come to the full council on Monday, and I look forward to your engagement, your ideas, your questions on where the final budget landed. And we'll also have a final public summary, because I have a commitment to trying to demystify our budget process to make sure the public knows how we're spending dollars, where our biggest investments are in our budget, especially general fund departments, and that will come as part of the presentation next week. So to camping. So yes, we worked diligently to try to get a memo done today. Being Monday, it's a very busy start to the week, And we wanted to make sure that we have the document fully vetted by the city attorney and homeless specialists that we have within CEDO. And I heard about this between the Board of Finance meeting and this meeting, which was about 1 minute between two meetings. So I apologize for not notifying counselors that we were not able to get it to you before the start of this meeting, but you'll have it tomorrow. And in that is actually, I've asked my staff to advance what I had originally asked them to produce by the end of the week, which was the plan that I had told you at the several council meetings in these comments that we were preparing for you. If your input and your feedback, that will be in that, that memo tomorrow, because my staff was working diligently on this. And in terms of really getting us to a point of collaboration, I just want to say for those comments earlier in this meeting, I would request benefit of doubt as new colleagues working together, that there's diligent work happening among city staff. I've asked since the end of April or so, there's a cross-department team that's been working on putting this plan together. They've met weekly, and hours of work have gone into this work. And to, again, offer that benefit of the doubt about why there might be a delay in offering a memo, when we talk about these investments of $50,000 going forward into fiscal year 25, that's, again, wanting to be informed by a plan that we have ample time to discuss with you, and that's why I requested today a work session when I met with Councilor Travers, which we do on a standing basis, and I appreciated his offering of some agenda time to do that work with all of you. And when we talked about that at the Board of Finance meeting, the $50,000 general proposal of some additional resources to support folks, there was no intention to mislead people. I see a health emergency in this city, and as a leader who was elected and trying to do a responsible job, and then seeing encampments increasing over the last several years, this didn't just start a week ago or 2 months ago. We have a health emergency, and I could not in good conscience as a mother, I could not in good conscience as someone who's lived here for 20 years, let people live without access to a porta potty. I could not let people live in piles of trash, and I could not live with making sure that people who are trying to survive because our state has failed us, and we are also living in a statewide housing emergency, exist without some decent, dignified, minimal amounts of support, which is 1 dumpster and 2 porta potties. So I apologize to Councilor Shannon if that was offensive in some way, but as I tried to work diligently with city staff to get you a plan to discuss and collaborate on, that felt like a bare minimum amount of dignity we could offer. And so you can blame me for that if you disagree with that approach. The Board of Finance, I already said that. So, and finally, we do have internal briefings from our park ranger, which I very much appreciate, and they monitor and visit every encampment that's throughout the city. This is not just happening along the bike path. And what I will say in those weekly reports we receive, there is consistent reporting that conditions remain stable. It is monitored. We're in a different time than Sears Lane. We have city staff who engage and try to make sure people are checked upon, offered some services. I really have appreciated the additional people with expertise trying to engage and build trust and relationships with folks who are seriously struggling in probably one of the most darkest times of their lives. And I think that is the right approach, and we're living in different times. So moving on to community safety, which you all had some interest in as well. Community safety investments, as I mentioned before, we've, through the budgeting process, which has been very time intensive and time consuming, we have put forward tangible expressions of support for this work for community safety. It's been a massive task to handle this budget process in these first 2 months. I've also during this time convened across departments to talk about community safety, different approaches, focusing on hotspots. Some things are just not ready to bring to you and to the public yet, because it takes time for departments to do their diligent work, and we've been working on this for the last 3-4 weeks, and again, 2 months into this administration. I asked for patience. To quote a counselor earlier today, we're in a really hard and unprecedented time when it comes to community safety. It is very complex. It is very important that we acknowledge when people are harmed, that we make space for victims to connect with our CJC and other places. And we have to make sure we're approaching this with breaking down silos and making sure that we're able to communicate things when we can and not get ahead of ourselves. And so I ask for your trust. I ask for your collaboration. I hope that is genuine when you use that word. It is when I use this word. That's why I recruited over 20 community members to start advising us, and we'll have our second meeting tomorrow. And I will bring you back those recommendations in about 4 weeks in the middle of July. Back to just mayor updates. We have a temporary hire to support our office. Her name is Amanda Gomez. I'm excited to bring her on board to support us this summer. She'll start next week, and I'll make sure to send out an invitation a little bit more on her background. She is a first immigrant young woman in the state of Vermont, and I really value that her ability to jump in when we have this gap in our office. For city highlights, we are in the transition with our outgoing planning director, and we have an interim who has stepped in, Charles, who's from that office, which I really appreciate. And the Councilor Travers will serve on that hiring committee on behalf of the council, and so we hope to bring in some strong applicants with a focus on equity and how we do planning and design here in our city. Let me just jump around a little bit. I met personally with the REIB staff for a couple hours last week to begin our redesign work. Also coming out of that, I interviewed a couple of candidates for our interim director role for REIB, and I'll be announcing that decision in the next 2 days, which I'm very excited about. I attended the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance biannual meeting, and you'll see reflected in my memo tomorrow some very sombering information that was shared at that alliance meeting, which emphasizes we have a bigger problem ahead of us than we have even now, with a significant defunding, and I'm using that term very purposely here, a defunding of the critical need that our communities need, especially Chittenden County, and more importantly, the largest city in Burlington. I'm not quite even sure how we're going to grapple with this, because so many people are going to suffer and face evictions, become homeless, who are not even unhoused at this point. And I hope, again, that we can work collaboratively in finding solutions, because we have a very large challenge ahead of us. More in the memo tomorrow. And then, let's see, for community engagement, my office met with the Burlington School District to discuss downtown safety concerns for Burlington High School and work collaboratively to look ways to strengthen coordination around Cherry Street, but also general communication with the school district when the police department is doing activity around our school campuses. This has come up in the Old North End in particular, and we can improve communication, and my office is trying to facilitate that. I've met with VTrans and federal transportation experts to discuss the next steps with the Rail Yard Enterprise Project and the Champlain Parkway. I held a business town hall with over 100 businesses to specifically talk about community safety, hear their concerns. We spent over an hour directly hearing their concerns and addressing things we could immediately with the help of the director of the Business and Workforce Development Office, but again, with follow-up from my office to make sure people feel heard and know that we are moving diligently forward. I met with the state attorney about coordination and support to her office and the city to improve that relationship. I was the opening speaker for the Professional Firefighters of Vermont Convention that they chose here in Burlington, which I greatly thank them for, because that is, again, a conscious choice that people can make about supporting Burlington. Just a couple more important pieces around community engagement, because my list is always long, and I'll send this again for the public record. I had the great honor of meeting with Pakistani LGBTQ+ out elected leaders who are visiting Vermont, and some of these folks were the first trans out elected folks in that entire country. And they were delighted to be here in Vermont around how much our city has really consciously tried to build itself to be an inclusive environment. And really, we're appreciative of being able to meet with the first woman, the first out LGBTQ+ mayor, probably in the history of Vermont. And that stuff really matters, and it's a great honor to be able to meet with other electeds who are facing very challenging places of even just existing, let alone being able to serve. This week, we begin our district neighborhood meetings. Calling it district meetings sounds like Hunger Games to me. So neighborhood meetings, we'll be doing one a week in each of your districts. If my office hasn't shared it yet, they will as soon as we can. And the first one is this Thursday, June 6th, at the Bagel from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And it will continue every first Thursday of the month from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. The Old North End or Central District meeting is on June 13th from 4:30 to 5:30. It will always be the second, I think that's a Thursday, because it's ahead of the MPA Wards 2 and 3. You'll see here a pattern. We're really trying to offer different times of day, attaching to other things folks might be wanting to come to, what traditionally has been done by the administration. June 19th is when I'll be in the South District, and forgive me, I think that's the third Wednesday, from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. at Zero Gravity. And finally, the fourth week, June 28th, which is a Friday, I believe, in the East District, we'll be trying a noontime gathering at the Fletcher Free Library from 12 to 1. And then just briefly on regional and state and legislative activity, this is my last point here. Some other councilors mentioned, and it was great disappointment that Governor Scott vetoed H72, which is the pilot program to allow the city of Burlington to stand up an overdose prevention center. This life-saving bill was supported by so many individuals, including our chief of police, our chief of fire, and myself. We sent a letter, no response. I followed up with a phone call, no response. And so that's incredibly disappointing when the leadership of the largest city in the state cannot even get a courtesy phone call when the governor's deliberating on a critical bill. On June 20th, we'll be debriefing with legislators on the session and figuring out ways for us to be better coordinated. On that agenda, we'll be asking how do we get to the point where we were defunding our critical needs in terms of our housing emergency, because I really fail to understand how we could pass a budget and do housing policy that frankly really fails our state of Vermont. And then finally, I'm attending the town manager meeting for the county at the end of the month. I also hope to bring up the unhoused challenges of unhoused folks, because it's starting to show up in multiple communities, because the sheer number of people who are facing homelessness and the more to come means this is a regional, it's obvious, a statewide issue, but more, I think people will be looking for Burlington to lead and set the tone of how we engage with these Vermonters and the solutions we come up with. Eyes will be on us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And we're looking forward to our meeting just 1 week from today on the 10th. As you and I both mentioned, I appreciate the time we'll be able to dedicate to addressing the realities presented by our unfortunately growing unhoused population. And also, just if I may, want to take a moment to thank you and CAO Shad and your whole team for all the great work that you've been putting into preparing all the budget materials which were presented to the Board of Finance tonight. I will flag for councilors that they are online on Civic Clerk for folks to take a look at. I appreciate CAO Shad, you as well, being able to share an Excel version of the spreadsheet, which apparently Civic Clerk doesn't digest very well, but if folks want an Excel copy of it, I do know that CAO Shad has a copy to share, and we'll look forward to further discussions on the budget on the 10th as well. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn, or we could stay all night.
So moved.
Okay. Motion to adjourn by Councilor Barlow. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Councilor Broderick. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. We are adjourned at 10:28 p.m. Thank you.